Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started with the August 22nd work session for Hudsonville Public Schools. Steve Bowerman and Larry Keppinga are absent this evening. All of the board members are present. Before we move on to approval of the agenda, I would like to pass it over to Dr. Vanderjack for a moment.
Are you able to hear me back there without a microphone at this point? This morning we started our school year. I feel like we're just here having this conversation. But we started our school year in a pretty exciting fashion. I was walking through these halls of this building, and we had close to, 550, 600 ninth graders very eager to start the school year. I would say a lot of nervous excitement. Most of our central office staff was throughout the district. Our administrators were working hard. Our teachers were amazing with our kids on the first day back. Unfortunately, we had a tragic accident earlier today in which we lost one of our bus drivers. Randy Tibbe is a driver for Hudsonville. He's been driving for about a little over 6 years. Was on the route at Baldwin Middle School, and I will say that he did what any amazing bus driver would do, is he made sure his kids made it safely to school. He unfortunately did not make it. So if we could just spend a minute thinking about his wife Sally. He has 2 children, one in Coopersville that's married with 2 kids, one in Zeeland that's married with 2 kids. The family's going through a lot right now. And as a transportation department, I know Rob Matthews is going to be here this evening. That team has been through a lot. Our team at Baldwin Middle School has been through a lot. I want to thank our central office staff who were phenomenal today, our administrators that throughout the district stepped up, and a staff that's hurting. So if we can just take a minute for Bandy and this family, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vanderjack. Okay, we'll move on. Can I have we want to make one amendment to the agenda, but we'll put a motion on the table first to approve the items on the agenda. Have a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion by Dawn, support from Chad. Okay, then Dr. Vanderjack asked to add an item number 9 around merit pay to the agenda as well. So can I have a motion around that?
So moved.
Motion by Dawn, support from Chad. Okay, any questions or comments around that second motion? We're going to go into details around that. Okay, all in favor of the amendment, excuse me, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Okay, then we go back to the motion to approve the agenda as written with the amendment. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Okay, then we move on to discussion items, and first up we have a transportation update.
So as the board may recall, several years ago, we had conversations regarding some of our bus routes. We are one of the unique districts where in Ottawa County, we are the only district that has allowed other districts to drive their buses not only through our district, but to stop in our district and to pick up students. No other district in Ottawa County, Kent County that I know of also allows that. Districts allow other districts to drive through, but not to stop in districts. We've had conversations, and I will say with primarily there are 2 areas in Hudsonville that Jenison Public Schools has taken their buses through our district and made multiple stops. We've talked about this for years. This started, I don't know if anybody was on the board when it started. It was probably close to 20 years ago when it started. Sorry, I'm leaning towards you, Mark. Yeah. And a lot of the conversation was simply because of the growth of Hudsonville. We didn't have room in the district to house students. So the point was that it's okay for them to make their stops. They've since, stops have increased. And we've had conversations a couple years ago about what to do when our new 5-6 building opens up and we do have room in the district. Do we still allow this practice to continue? We met as a Superintendent's Association in Ottawa County and agreed that this is is something we would not continue, and that we would work on diminishing those routes. Currently, there are about 66 stops in Hudsonville Public Schools that are buses will stop and pick up students and take them back to their home school of Jenison. I will be very clear, there are two main areas. One is just to the west of 28th and Baldwin, which is near the, I think it's called Kids First Building in Jenison. There is a subdivision that's right there that is Jenison, and there's one next to it that's Hudsonville, and the streets intertwine. There's also an area north of Bower Road, which is, it's called Lowing Woods, in which the streets intertwine, and the only way for Jenison to get to their homes is to go through Hudsonville, and the same thing for Hudsonville has to go through some Jenison streets. We've agreed to stop in Hudsonville to pick up kids, and Jenison's agreed to stop in Jenison to pick up kids. What I really want to have the conversation on by the board is we're getting some pushback from parents who are like, why can't you pick me up where my kid is, even though they're considered a school of choice student, and to have those conversations about what that looks like. It's kind of a big deal, only because, as you can imagine, we don't have a ton of bus drivers to make extra routes. We want to pick up our kids where they are. We also want to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep our kids safe too on the roads. There are some areas, most of the subdivisions that we're talking about, in fact, I think all of them do have sidewalks, but I can't guarantee they're all plowed at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning when kids are walking. We still maintain kids are picked up no longer than a quarter-mile walk, which is part of board policy when it comes to that. So I really want to open up the conversation and what the board position on this, because I know it's a lot, especially when it's, we're dealing with what we dealt with today, and then having conversations about transportation. Are we to a point by saying, you know what, we got to focus on those that live in Hudsonville? Had conversations with neighboring superintendents from Zeeland to Granville, even Byron Center, and they keep their stops in their district and not go into other districts. Not to drive, but to stop. So that's a lot. I'm teeing it up, and I don't know if it's just maybe further conversation in the future, but I wanted to bring that up to the board because we're getting to the point where that 5-6 building's opening up next year. We need to talk about what that school of choice looks like. There are currently about just over 800 students at school of choice from Hudsonville to Jenison, and there are about 130 students at school of choice back. Those numbers are about a year old, so we won't know for a couple more, another month, but that's what it's like.
So this would also include students who are technically Jenison, but are going to Hudsonville, and we would have to stop picking them up, is what you're saying?
We would pick them up in the closest stop in Hudsonville, which we've done, except for one area we have to move the stop a little bit farther down. It's Valhalla. I think that's how you pronounce it. Is it Valhalla?
It's Valhalla.
Valhalla. Yeah.
And it's still within that quarter mile?
It is.
And we have capacity to take the, well, we're not increasing the kids, I'm sorry, but are there any downsides to it if we stop?
So it's always
And this
hard.
won't-
It's always
we
hard
have
when a
the- yeah.
student attends a school
Yeah.
and then they have to make a decision whether or not they change schools based on transportation needs.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest downfall. I think educationally, I'm not going to lie, both school systems are great school systems. It's a convenience. I can tell you where I used to live in Georgetown area, we're a mile away from Jenison High School. And I was about 6 or 7 miles away from this building. It's the way the lines are drawn. I didn't draw them, nor can I change them. Just trying to figure out where we should be driving, because the farther, if it continues, the farther it goes, then it's just, now it goes 2 more houses down and 2 more houses down. And that's what it started. It sounds like it started, and I don't know if it was even a topic that the board discussed 20 years ago.
No, we never discussed it back then. I can't think of the gentleman's name who was superintendent.
Dave Dressler.
dresser, he was actually doing some door knocking and soliciting students from the district. I think it's a different situation now. I think it's maybe family issues that they want the children to go to the same school just to oversee. Now, we aren't concerned about them driving through our district. We're
Correct.
concerned about them picking up students in our district for them.
Stopping in the district, correct.
So
We would
we don't-
still allow them to drive through.
We don't really have any idea how that would change the configuration in terms of the schools of choice. They might continue schools of choice
Sure.
just to deliver the students.
That's
on the
correct.
road and then stop them.
That's correct. Yeah, we're definitely not diminishing that, we're not denying students that want to leave Hudsonville, go to Jensen, or vice versa.
I've never had a good feel about going to other districts to pick up students. You know, I'm not very comfortable with them, so.
And then you talked about that the Ottawa County superintendents have talked about it. How does Jensen feel about this? And do we have a good relationship that
Yeah,
they're in agreement as well that this needs to stop?
Well, yes and no. We have a great relationship. Let me answer that question first. I mean, Dr. Graham and I are really good friends. I was great friends with Tom Tenbrink when he was there. You know, it's unique, right? I went to Jenison and I work here, and he went to Hudsonville and he works there. So it's kind of an interesting dynamics between the two of us. But he understands that neither one of us maybe started this, but we probably have to address it before it continues. And it's gotten much, I'm going to say worse, not under either one of our watches, but just because it was what we've done. He understands. We met last year, about this time last year, and he understood the request. I gave him time to say, listen, I understand it. It affected several of our students. It affected hundreds of theirs. So they're trying to have, I did say that we'll give you a little bit of time. I didn't expect him to send an email out to all of his parents saying, we're not going to pick you up this year. But when school starts next year, it will look different.
Now, we border a number of other districts.
We do.
Allenville, Granville.
Zealand.
Is this going on with any other districts or just Jenison?
It is not going out.
Okay.
I think you make a good point, Mark, because as our community land keeps getting eaten up with subdivisions, those borders, housings are going to get closer and closer. And the precedent we've set would be difficult to then say no in either of those other borders once they would get that close. So that would be a concern that I would have if we didn't say no most of the time.
Yeah. The state, the Michigan school code, it says specifically in their school of choice students, there's not a requirement to pick them up in their resident district. It doesn't deny the fact that we could do it, but it doesn't, it specifically says that it's not a requirement for us to pick them up.
Other thoughts, comments? Anybody?
I just think it cleans it up.
Mhm.
We should send a thank you note to Dave Dresser.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's a long time ago, and at some point, the decision, it's a tough decision. And I feel for families that we want to make sure that kids they're safe. It's just at some point, I think we have to say, here are our district boundaries, here are Jennison's district boundary. And we very well will have, we could have some special needs situations that we work out.
True.
It's still a priority to get the kids safely to school, but we have to clean up in my opinion.
I certainly support cleaning it up. It sounds like this isn't a decision that was made today. It's something that's been communicated and talked about and planned about for a long time, and I get that it's, it can be a concern, but I think in the long run, we just have to clean it up.
Okay, I think I'm hearing, I think we're consenting on it's time to address it and keep working toward cleaning it up, so.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, anything else on that?
No.
Good? Okay. Next up, we have book review process, and this was to talk about the appeals process to the board for books. And I wanted to open up the discussion now. And just a note, Amy, you're seeing in the teaching and learning next agenda item, you're going to cover some more information around books and book transparency.
Yes.
So, okay. So we may, depending on how the conversation goes, we may merge 2 and 3 a little bit here. But I want to just open it up to discussion around the book review process and how the board would like to proceed and how we frame that in as we go forward. So,
Can I make just a couple
yes,
quick
you may,
comments?
absolutely.
So at the last board meeting, the board approved a policy that allowed the board to hear an appeal if there was an appeal regarding the decision that the committee had made. regarding a book that was in question. That since has gone into place and that policy is updated on our website. Mrs. Taylor and her team have updated the book guidelines so that part of that now states follows up with the board appeal. And so I think the question I know the board has asked is what does that look like when somebody appeals it to the board? We don't have any other appeal process that goes to the board except when it comes to student discipline. And that process is laid out. This process is not laid out. So this is probably an opportunity to have that discussion on what that looks like when there is an appeal around a decision that a committee, a book review committee came up with.
I think it's important that we are all on the same page as far as what books we're talking about, because obviously we have curriculum, which is always vetted and approved. And my understanding is the main problem seemed to be with books either in the library or in the classroom, and mainly at the high school level. So I guess as we're talking about that, I want to make sure that's what we're all talking about, so there's no confusion later. Is that everybody else's understanding?
I'm a little narrower, it helps me to be narrow. I was focused on the Ruggie appeal, and I think that could serve as a prototype of how we're going to proceed with other appeals. And I think Barb, you had responded saying we need to have some protocol or some thoughts about how we're going to do this. So rather than just throwing the book on the table and say, let's talk about this, we should have some idea, maybe Barb, you have some thoughts about how we can.
But I still want to get to the point, Mark, is this about curriculum books as well? Or is it just about the library, the books that are not required reading and not part of the curriculum? Because to me, those need to be treated separately.
We approve books, science books or English books, whatever, we approve those books today. And, okay, so you want to make that distinction?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I'm thinking through what you said.
Right,
Okay.
that if the book review process is really for books that aren't part of the curriculum, then I think we need to use that as our parameter for making those decisions. Because to me, a curriculum book, I would feel much more differently if it was required reading as part of our curriculum versus books that aren't necessarily part of the curriculum. So that's why I'm going to make sure we're all on the same page as we're having this conversation, that we're talking about the same kind of materials.
Yeah,
I
curriculum
think
is
we
done.
need
I'm
to
sorry.
have both.
Okay.
I don't think we can have one process without the other. I think we need to talk about both.
Can you elaborate on both? I'm sorry, this is not my conversation. I just want to make sure make sure we have the right steps in place. The board already approves books that are required reading, right? Biology books require all class readings. The board approves them. Are you saying that if somebody appeals the decision the board made, they could appeal that?
Dawn's asking about curriculum, I guess
That's what I mean, we guys put it in like
Textbooks
Yeah.
versus
Right.
textbooks,
Textbooks versus-
traditional to
Once they're
textbooks
approved by the board,
versus-
then can they be
reading material.
appealed?
Right, because some of the curriculum, I believe, probably has a book that's part of, say, English reading. Correct?
Correct. We call those whole class novels. So if the
Okay.
whole class is required to read it, that's considered, those are board approved books.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so, to me, that there's a distinction between those two, is what I am saying.
I would agree, if the board has already approved the whole class
Okay.
novel, why would someone appeal back to the board? We've already made a decision, and we support that book.
Okay. Well, and I agree, that's why I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay, good distinction, clarification. Other thoughts, comments? Again, I sent out a note to also spur some thoughts to the board on things that we need to cover. And then to your point, Mark, it's about that structure that, how we structure this thing going forward. We only have a disciplinary appeals process to kind of benchmark. So
I think it might be helpful, Ken, if we went through these questions
We can
and
do
had a
that.
discussion on each one, because I think that might tailor our
okay,
discussion.
we can do that. Did you?
I don't know if I know for sure what questions. Was it the one
Well, I'll
that
just-
you did yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll read them off. We'll just
Okay.
go through them. So the first one, and there are others, I'm sure, these were top of mind that I had. Are we reviewing the book, or are we reviewing the decision of the book review committee? And I think an analogy there is like with disciplinary appeals, we are reviewing the decision made by the administrative team, correct? Not the manager.
That's
So
correct.
what do we-
You
And
do
so
not-
is it
you
the
do not do
same?
your own investigation.
We do not
regarding-
do our own investigation,
Right.
right? So,
You hear from the administration, and you hear from the person appealing, and then you make your
right.
determination
So in the case of,
in discipline.
yeah, so the book review committee would still go through their process of the book, reviewing the book, and then if there was an appeal, that would come to the board, and the board would say, yeah, we agree with the committee, or no, we don't, or we have concerns here, here, and here. And so that's the first, again, open that up, thoughts?
That's how I would see it. I would see
Okay.
it almost like a trial. Both sides present their information.
Mhm.
You can ask questions, and then you deliberate and make a decision.
I'm a little bit concerned, having been on prior committees that have done weeks and weeks of work, that if it's a unanimous decision of a committee, to then say, but anybody can appeal no matter what your decision, and now basically we take away whatever decision you made. One of the thoughts that I had is, would we treat it like a typical vote sort of situation, that if it was not unanimous, or say it was only 2/3 that said, yes, we want to keep this book, then we would consider it for appeal. And maybe that comes from a legal background, because there's two types of appeals you can have. One just because, and one because of an error, or something to that effect. If I was a committee person and spent all this time talking and having conversations and reading the book and thoughtfully giving this consideration, knowing that regardless of what the committee decided, a parent can automatically immediately appeal to the board, and the board has to basically then review that whole process, it would be difficult, I would think, to have people that would say, yes, I'm going to continue to do this, because what did their opinion mean? Now, that might go back to, was the committee fairly compromised? Not meaning it was compromised, but fairly put together. And if in fact we have random people chosen that have agreed to do it, and we have all of our stakeholders involved, I don't want to say it's insulting, but I do think we have to take into consideration, if it's a unanimous decision, is that appropriate to then appeal regardless?
That's a delicate issue, I recognize that. That's always been on my mind when the board has reviewed discipline issues. And I've had concerns in the past when we've had discipline issues, and particularly if a board member doesn't support that, but they don't give the reason. I've had issues with that before. But I think that's something that will be worked out in the process. There will be some give and take, and we will learn, the committee will learn about us, we'll learn about the committee. But I don't think under any circumstances, the board can ever abdicate the responsibility to make the final decision. We want to respect the committee, but we can't, the school board cannot at any point say we assign this responsibility to anybody except for the board that has to have that final say.
So you're treating it like the sex education committee, that they do work for a year, they make a recommendation, and then we either say, yes, we agree with your recommendation, or no, we don't? Because to me, then we've got to be consistent.
Yeah, it could be like that, but this is different than the sex education committee. That's approving of a process. This, we have folks that are in the building, and they're being challenged.
Okay.
Somebody
else talked a little bit, but I have some other thoughts on that.
I feel that if someone wants to appeal, they should be able to appeal to the board, regardless if the decision was unanimous. I feel that's a parent's right if they want to bring it to the board. But I'm not saying, like, one of the questions is who can do the appeal? I think it needs to be, if Mark did the appeal and Mark didn't want to proceed, I can't pick up that appeal and proceed on Mark's behalf. It's got to be the people involved.
By that, you mean the parents, Barb, or?
Whoever initiated the appeal.
Okay.
I'm assuming most of these appeals will come from parents, but
Yeah.
I can't know who else they would come from, but
A student could appeal if the decision was against a book and removing the book, then especially under the court rules as well as some of the statutes and cases, a student could also appeal a decision. So that would be another person who would have the ability to appeal.
Is that the second question? I'm sorry.
That is, we sort of jumped to the second one.
Yes.
Kind of merging questions together. Can anyone become appeal to the board or other defined groups? I had down there. So what if somebody outside the district decided to appeal? Or somebody who didn't have their student or one of their children wasn't involved, but they said, hey, I want to appeal this. Do we need some definition around that, some boundaries around that?
We think it would have to be somebody in the district, student or parent. And I can't imagine saying that somebody from Los Angeles is going to appeal something in Hudsonville,
Sure.
Michigan. It's going to be somebody within the district, parent or child in the district.
Good.
They have to have a vested interest.
A parent with a child in the district?
No, a parent, a citizen, a parent, a child, because the citizens ultimately are the ones who vote for villages and vote for board members, so the citizens have to have the voice, the ability to make them feel as well. Because it isn't only the children who are educated here, the board and the school district actually shapes the community. We have a lot of influence in shaping the community, and so the citizens do have a right to appeal, as I would understand it.
So let me make sure I get this straight. You're saying anybody can appeal, anybody can request a book reviewed as long as they're a citizen of this community. But once that person has it reviewed and then doesn't like the answer, that's the only person who can then appeal the answer, correct?
I think that was part of the response to my review.
Okay.
We've had issues in the past. I know when the Bible was an issue back in the 70s or so, we had people outside the district that wanted to make a deal about the Bible. And so we actually had them move into the district so that they could make that appeal. They had to be within the bounds of the district. They can't be from another area. That would be, I think, that would open Pandora's box.
So walk through what you just said again. Say that one more time.
So to me, if a book is going to come before the committee, it has to be,
Before the committee, not the board.
yes,
The committee
committee
first.
has to be, even that has to be from someone who is, as you said, a citizen
Yes.
of our district that votes on board members, regardless of whether it's a grandparent, regardless of whether it's a homeschool parent, whether they have a child in elementary or high school, as long as they are a voting citizen of Hudsonville School District. But once that person requests it be reviewed, and if the review committee says we will not pull it, that's the only person who can then appeal to the board.
That would be understanding, but you narrowed it a little more from our previous discussion. We did say students, and I'm not sure if we want to let the students do that or not.
If they're 18, students have a legal right to appeal.
Yeah, I just want
You
to
know,
make sure we have the right parameters.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, obviously, our goal is not to violate anybody's rights, and that would include students who are 18 years old, if they wanted to do that. The biggest concern that I have, Mark, about that next appeal process coming to us is that we all have a lot of homework to do as well, because with respect to First Amendment, with respect to the cases that have been cited, that only one of them has been within Michigan over our jurisdiction. The one that they rely on is very clear that there are only very specific reasons, and even then, it's not gone to the Supreme Court as to how you could withdraw a book. And it would require that I think we would have to have a constitutional attorney provide us with that guidance, rather than just saying, we think for this reason, because it's very clear based on the information that we have.
Correct, but it's not just about taking the book out of the district. It might be removing it out of a classroom library and requiring a consent.
So my understanding is those two
getting-
things don't make a difference when it comes to First Amendment rights.
It's giving the parents back control, from my understanding.
And again, remember, we're talking about books that parents already have control over, because these are not required books, and it's books that let me finish, that their students can choose. And yes, the parents should know if their child is able to choose a book at certain levels. But what I'm saying is whether it's in this media center or whether it's in a teacher's room, for First Amendment purposes and why we would remove a book, that process, based on current cases that have not gone to the Supreme Court of the United States, there are very, very slim and small areas in which we can enforce that based on our opinions. and feelings.
But you're not saying that we couldn't take for some reason, pull a book out of ask that a book be moved from a classroom into a media center? That, I mean,
Probably not,
the way-
because as
the way
long
I
as
think
it's
about it is it's
considered
all-
public,
It's
right.
all one
Mhm. I mean, to
collection
me,
of books in the district. It's all like one big
Right.
library, just with books
to
scattered.
me, it's
in.
kind of like a shuffle, because again, if it's in the classroom versus in the media center, all it means is that student then goes to the media center. And if that's how we think it needs to be done, that's fine.
Yeah.
I do think the legal analysis is the same, whether you move it from classroom to the media center.
I think that's, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
I think that's part of what you're going to talk about, right, Amy, is the control of books when they're in the media center environment versus a classroom environment, the transparency of that,
And
correct?
just looking to increase transparency
Yeah.
around
And
access
right
for
now,
parents.
we don't have transparency.
As far as,
Do the parents know what books are in the classroom library and what's in the main library? Because,
yeah.
I know my kids reading.
Yeah, and part of that is the parent responsibility. Again, I don't think everybody checks their kid's backpack. I'm sure they probably don't at the high school level.
but you can have reading during class where the book never goes home. Because you have free time reading in the classroom, where I could pick up a book off of a classroom library, and I could read it just in the classroom, and the book might never go home. And as a parent, I wouldn't know.
So you're saying that child would choose not to bring it home? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
For whatever reason, they maybe don't bring their backpack ever home, I don't know.
Okay.
You know how boys are sometimes, I don't know.
So you want every classroom to have a list of every book they currently have in their classroom, and our library to do the same? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
I don't mean to interrupt. We're going to get into that conversation.
Okay.
That was, I know they're tied together, and I don't mean to derail the train, sorry, but they are going to get into that conversation. I think that's an important conversation to have.
So I want to loop back up and just make sure I've got this correct on who can appeal on the board. So what I'm hearing, tell me if I'm wrong, is that a citizen of the district can make an appeal to the book review committee. That same person must make the appeal to the board. Did I hear that right?
If the outcome of the decision is not to
If
their
the outcome's,
Right.
right, exactly.
Can I just phrase this? The policy that you just approved does say, sorry.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. Any group, any person or group having a legitimate interest. And I know that's a vague term, but I think that should have something to do with it too. There are people that will probably appeal 1,000 books. And I think the question is, what is the legitimate interest in doing? That's a decision the board will have to
Yeah,
make.
and I think we just define that legitimate, that's how I do that, we just define that legitimate interest. We just made that decision. Chad, are you?
Yeah, I like that. I like the legitimate interest wording better, because not everyone's a citizen of the community if they school a choice or kids from another community into our district, and I think they've got a stake as well.
Yeah.
So I like the
Good
legitimate
point.
interest.
Okay, now, we were kind of starting to bridge the third bullet there in the most recent discussion. So what motion is made at the end of the appeal process? So it comes to the board, and we have to make a motion on, do we remove the book from the district? And when I say the district, I'm talking about all the collective libraries and the classrooms and the media centers and so forth. Do we place the book in the restricted area? Do we give direction that the book will be moved in the restricted area? Are there other motions? What decisions are we making, or we want to leave that up? Yeah, go ahead.
So one decision would be the ruling stands and the book stays wherever it's at.
Mhm.
Another decision is the book is removed out of the classroom library to a main library for the purpose of for either having a consent or not having a consent. And then, or the book could stay in the classroom library but requires a consent. Because you could have it stay in the classroom library with nothing. You could have it removed from the classroom library to the main library with or without a consent, or it could stay in the classroom library with a consent. Or remove it out of the district.
And I'll just, I agree with us having, this is new. I'm supportive of the fact that we're sort of learning through this, and I'm supportive of having a process where it can be appealed to the board. I'll just point out, it's nice to have some guidelines, but I don't think we can per se envision every possible outcome, and at the end of the day, the board can make whatever decision the board chooses to make at the time of the appeal. So if it's agree with the recommendation of the committee, or frankly, any other decision the board wants to make at that point, the board is able to make. I think the board would do it with the counsel of legal and others to advise that whatever action we're taking is in accordance with the law, but if it's remove the book from the district, if it's restricted to the media center and put parental controls on it, I think really we can make any decision we want to make at that point.
And I agree, I just wanted to make sure that, hence the other down there, but I just wanted to make sure that I understood, everybody understood, is this a black and white, it's out of the district or it's in the district? I also agree that there's a number of different approaches that can be taken, and we listed out, I think, some good ones from the framework standpoint, but you're right, Chad, there may be another approach we want to take as well, and we just gotta, through the process, we gotta get a motion on the table.
It's maybe a middle school book, and we recommend it gets moved to high school.
Could be that.
It's not
Yep.
appropriate for a certain age range,
Yep.
would be another option.
And can I ask, in the current book review guidelines, how many books last year went through that process for review?
For the committee,
Yeah.
2.
So I'm not concerned about us getting overwhelmed or inundated with this, and frankly, I think we're learning through it, and I think we'll learn as we go, and if we decide to revise the process as we go, I think each time we'll learn through it. If we have a book come before the board and we reach some outcome contrary to the committee, I think we'll learn through it, and it'll probably inform how we devise the book guidelines in general.
I just want to clarify too, though, are we saying they can appeal regardless of whether one person or no person or 5 persons said yes or no?
No, I'm in agreement with the fact of whoever raised the original concern is the party who would need to appeal. And if you're going to have an appeal, I don't know that it matters if the decision was unanimous or if it was a divided decision. If you're giving them the right to appeal, they've got the right to appeal.
And again, I hate to beat this over the head, but if someone is appealing a book, you know what outcome they want. And if that's not the outcome they get, they're going to immediately appeal. And again, I want to be sympathetic to the committee that's doing this book review, because we're expecting a lot, and they are volunteers. And we'll see. I hope it doesn't change that, and they still feel a duty to do their full diligence. But I also have some empathy for those who know that no matter what they say, it could very easily be appealed. So.
Can I make maybe a recommendation, I don't know if it's a recommendation, just a thought. Maybe the board hears an appeal and they have 2 choices similar to what the book committee did. Number 1, they could remove the book from the intended place that it is. Or number 2, they could retain it in the current place. And basically, if they overturn the decision of the committee, then it's maybe up to us to figure out where it would go in that conversation. Similar to what we do with student discipline. When the board overturns a student discipline, you don't tell us how to discipline the kid. You say, they're not expelled, go figure out how you're going to educate the student. If you say, no, this book it's not going to stay in the classroom, then we have to come back to you and say, okay, here's where it's going to go. It's going to go in here, it's going to go in there, go from there, as opposed to the board making those like operational things that are truly administrative things. But the board hears the appeal and says, okay, yes, we agree or we don't. And if you don't agree with the decision of the committee, it's up to us to then say, okay, here's a recommendation for where the book would go, based on conversation that you have in an appeal hearing like we had before with student discipline. That's just an analogy I have.
Yeah, I'm personally not comfortable with that, and why I haven't come to the board in some aspect. I think the board needs to make a decision. And this is an issue that is impacting schools across Michigan and across the country. I think when you look at a lot of this, there's compromises, and I think you can make everyone happy. It's about giving parents control. This is kind of about. It's about giving parents control of what the kids are reading. If they're 18, that's different. But, you look at like seniors. I don't know, I'm just not comfortable with going back to that.
And theoretically, the board could do whatever they wanted to, or they could send it back to the committee. I think it would be unwise to do that, however. I think that once it gets to the board level, it should stay there and get a result. Otherwise, you're gonna have a back and forth and back and forth. I appreciate your thoughts there, Kevin, but I think it probably, in my opinion, it's gonna depend on the event that takes place. The board could say, well, I didn't like what Barb said or Mark said or what Colin said, it's gonna go back to me. But I think that's at the board level. They probably should get a result, get it off the table and move on. That's what should like.
Good comment? Yeah, from the board getting involved in sort of operational things, I understand what you're saying, but because of the nature of this, and because we are learning, we may change 3 years from now, who knows, but because of the nature of this, and because we're learning, because we want to understand this more, I do think, I like the options, I like having the options, I like saying we could decide to put it in the main library, do this, do that, do this, do that. So I think the flexibility of this one is important. Other thoughts on that? Good suggestion, though. We're thinking through it as we go, so.
Just one other thing, and I'll bring this up maybe again tonight, and I'm sure in the future. We're dealing with the back end of the issue, we need to be dealing with the front end of the issue. And that is how books get in the first place. And my particular concern is about books which are sexually explicit. And I think we have to address that as a board. It's not on the agenda tonight, I see that, but it has to come before us sooner or later.
Do we know how many wish lists were submitted by teachers this year?
Don't. And when you say wish list, are you saying?
You know how the start of the school year, those teachers have their wish list? I thought there was a process for them to be approved. I'm wondering how many wish lists. I know you had mentioned at a breakfast meeting that teachers weren't submitting a list. I'm just wondering how many teachers did request books and how they were approved and who approved them and did you have any issues?
I think the wish list I'm processing, I think a lot of those were happening through Amazon and various places. And so those processes were put in place to be approved by building administrators. So I don't have that data, but I can certainly take a look at that.
Okay. I think we're getting alignment around this, so the last one I had down there, again, kind of a tactical item, but are the board members required to read the book prior to approval? I'm relating that back up to the first bullet, where are we reviewing the book or are we reviewing the decision made by the book review committee? And again, just like we don't investigate a student, the board doesn't go in depth and investigate a student around disciplinary issues. I'm kind of looking at it the same way with the book review committee. A board member may decide to read the book, or maybe not, or say, give me the key excerpts that we need to understand. But again, open that up to the board. Thoughts?
Well, we can't make board members do anything they don't want to do. But my opinion, which is quite strong, is that we can't speak to a book unless we've read the book.
So we're going back to investigating the book, not the decision.
Well, I think that's part of investigating the decision. You can't really evaluate the decision unless you've read. I think you probably require your committee members to read the book. I don't think we should let the board get by with any less than the committee has to do. And I think, again, we can't force the board members to do it. They might have their wife read it or somebody else, but I think it's imperative that the board members, each board member has a conversant understanding of the book and what's in it.
So as Mark said, that's a guideline, a recommendation,
It's my
but
thought.
nobody in the board can be forced to read it. So it's what you would consider a best practice. And
I-
practice,
yes, I would.
but others. So other thoughts around that? Okay. Okay, I think we have the framework of a process, a procedure going forward. Again, but I don't want to shut the discussion off too quick. Other thoughts, comments, concerns?
If I may
Yes,
interject a
please.
thought.
Yeah.
In fact, Nicole is just sharing this thinking, which I think is a good one to consider, and I'm not sure if this is placed here or as we roll into the next part of what we'd like to talk about books, but
Yeah.
is there a time between the process of the appeal? So if a committee reviews any book, I won't even choose a title, reviews a book and makes a recommendation about, they make their final decision about what should happen with the book, and then that person who requested the book go through review appeals that to the board, is there then a time period in which someone else can come back and say, I want another committee to review this book because I still don't like the outcome? Do you see?
Mhm.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Parent
And-
A went through the process, parent A maybe was happy, maybe they weren't happy, but parent B did like the outcome. And so now parent B is gonna go through the appeal
Or
process.
C, or D, or E, or F, right?
It's almost like a double jeopardy.
Yeah.
You know,
Once and done.
I would be uncomfortable saying that another parent can come and make the same appeal.
Could you appeal the placement of the ultimate decision of the board?
The particular part of it perhaps, but not the whole thing.
I would say the board's decision is final.
All right, that's all I do. This is the board's decision.
Yeah, the board's made a decision, that's fine.
I think the question is the board agreeing to hear every appeal made, or is the board exercising discretion which appeals it wishes to hear? So as an example, it's the Have Leo Son book, I think that's something that the board is willing to hear an appeal of, but there may be another one that's coming through the second time, or if somebody feels as though the original claim is entirely frivolous. And I don't have a good example of what that could be, but you go, somebody's objecting to a book, they appeal it to the committee says, no, clearly your claim is frivolous, we're keeping it, and they appeal it to the board. Does the board automatically agree to hear every appeal just because it was appealed to the board? Or is it something where the board goes, that's not good
We're
news?
like the Supreme Court and we pick and choose what we're gonna hear.
Yeah, right.
There should be probably some of that, Chad. I think your point is well taken, because there could be frivolous appeals that come before us. We could have somebody take a book that's been accepted for a long time, like, I'm thinking of,
I mean, the Bible, that could be.
I'm not thinking of the Bible.
No,
It's
that
been-
could be.
It's been accepted for a long time.
Yeah.
To kill a mockingbird.
It could be. That's the book. You're reading my mind, that's not scary.
Good book.
Yeah, that's terrifying, yeah. But that's been accepted for a long time, and I think that would be a frivolous thing to bring before the board. And so I think you're correct, and we could say, as the Supreme Court says, we're not going to hear this. That should be a reason.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, again, I think we've got a framework. Now, one more question we need to talk about was, I'm going back to the point about who can appeal, and we said this, a legitimate interest, somebody with a legitimate interest can appeal to the book committee, and then that same person appeal to the board. So in that context, I know if Mr. and Mrs. Rujik are out there, but does the request for the appeal by Mr. and Mrs. Rujik meet that criteria? Or is that a separate appeal that came in? Or an appeal that came in from somebody else other than the original appeal?
There were two requests for reconsideration of text that came in from two separate parents.
Okay.
The one parent who has then requested that the board take further action based on the review committee's final determination is one of those parents.
Okay, so that's all, we're all meeting those criteria?
Correct.
Okay, all right, I'm sure.
I think the piece that we would want to get clear about, and we can process through how that rolls out, because when that particular family requested that the board take further action. We did not have the board policy in place that spelled out there is a process of appeal. We did not currently have that in place.
Right.
And so
At
I
that
think-
time.
At that time.
Right, right.
And so those policy changes that are those additions that we now have in policy have been added to the reconsideration of text process and documents, as well as the book review guidelines that are for our teachers. And so I think we would want to just be clear with that family. I don't know if they've reached out to you. I think that appeal, according to the board policy, would go to the superintendent. And I don't believe that we've received that. So we would just have to make that clear. It's just kind of wonky. I would want to honor what the family we have heard clearly would like in alignment with the process and the timing of how the board policy was just adopted a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That was a messy way to
So
say it, I feel
you're
like.
saying the routine appeal needs to go without first? and then-
I think in the future, we would expect them to
Okay.
follow the policy,
Okay.
but we feel they clearly expressed it.
Yeah,
an
that's it.
appeal.
Well, we were catching up on working through the.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
And that
that's
has
fine.
been given in
So in
writing
the
to you
future.
at this
Yeah.
point.
That's
With,
an appeal, has it been given to a board member, that their actual appeal, Friendship and
Yes,
James appeal?
yes, I-
Yes, it came out, yes,
Okay.
I've got it as
Okay.
well,
Okay,
yeah.
I just
Yes.
wanted
Yeah.
to make sure we were on the same page.
No,
with
good
how to
question,
proceed.
yeah.
So just, so I'm assuming this would be similar, we'd set up a hearing, just like we would in any other situation, not part of a work session or a board meeting. It would be a separate appeal hearing that we'd set up a time if that was on.
That's a process issue. I don't know. It could be a regular board meeting we wanted to do, or we have a special hearing on those disciplinary issues. The issue with disciplinary issue had to be closed session.
Right.
This would not have to be closed session. So it could be,
Well, this would have to be,
Closed session.
this would have to be dealt with by proper notice to all interested persons, is what the statute says. So it would have to be given to the person who appealed it, probably the book committee, and anyone else who has an interest in the outcome of this. So however
We
that
should
would
a
be.
parent can be there. I just don't know if they can make a board meeting or whatever, if they
Right.
should be
yeah.
there.
In my opinion, I would want it as a separate hearing, because it could be fairly involved depending on what each side wants to bring to the
And it
table.
wouldn't matter to me.
Well, and I think we'd want notice and adequate
Yes.
time to
Yeah, I would agree.
read the book and
Right.
read any
Exactly.
additional
Supporting
information.
Yep.
Yep.
I believe the timeline you landed on in the board policy was 30 days. Yes.
Right.
You're in right.
We just don't want things to continue to fester.
But that point, I think 30 days from the time of the appeal, we would want the board notified timely and provided the materials in advance too, a copy of the book and
Okay.
So in this particular situation, I guess we have to determine what was the start date of the appeal, because we didn't really have a process in place, so, you know,
The start
that's,
date would be whenever the individuals file their appeal.
you know, because we hadn't have an appeal process yet, so that's what I'm saying.
We'll start
Things
tomorrow.
won't-
We'll get it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, good. Again, I feel like we have a framework. I think we'll learn as we go, but I think we've got a way to go forward.
And you'll work to get a date set for this appeal.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other, again, I don't want to shut down conversation on if there's any other thoughts, comments. Okay. All right, then, I think related to this is the teaching and learning feature, and so go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
There's two parts, one
Okay.
around book transparency and then one around MTSS processes and procedures. So I'll just get us started here, but first, I just wanted to, I guess, remind ourselves of the process, right? And so, Mr. Tuttle, when you talked about the idea of just, when we know better, we do better, those are my words, not yours, but that idea of it's just continuous improvement, and we move and we shift and we adjust, and that is really what we're here to talk about tonight in regard to increased transparency. And so some of the pieces that we worked on last year were around increased transparency, and some of those actions were to share a letter at all levels, elementary, middle school, and high school, with all parents at the beginning of trimesters at the high school, semesters at the middle school, and then upper grades at the elementary at the beginning of the year, talking about, we read all kinds of books. We have choice reading books, we have whole class reads, we have book club books, and those operate in various capacities. And so we increased a large amount of transparency around book club books and allowing parents to read information about the books that were on a book club list, sometimes 10 to 15 books, starting in about 4th grade, or starting in 4th grade. Those book club lists are shared with families of the books that are on that list, as well as then an opportunity for parents to reach out and say, these are the books that I would not like my child to read. That goes through 8th grade, and then also moving into high school, we provide a summary of the book that teachers have put together that their child has chosen to read and has been placed in that book club. And we do require parents to give permission of their child to read that particular book club book. So those are some actions that we took last year to increase transparency around books. I would also say, I think those are probably the big ideas around the work that we did last year. Transparency absolutely aligns with our core values. We've said that from the beginning. We want parents involved in their child's reading life. We know and recognize that we service over 7,000 students in the district, and they come to us with varying needs and values and histories that we often don't know. And so the more that parents can be involved in their child's reading life, they then can make those decisions and ensure that there aren't going to be anything that might be hurtful to their child or against their, quite frankly, their family values and what they would like their child to have exposure or access to. And so living into that vein of our values and what we value here at Hudsonville Public Schools about parents' critical role in education, this is Nicole Ball. She is our new, for lack of a better way to say it, she is our new librarian. She can say her full title and maybe just introduce herself briefly. Say the full title, it's super great.
It feels a lot. Library Media Integration Specialist.
So Nicole, maybe you can just share a little bit about yourself here in a minute, but I'll give kind of the bird's eye view of what we have done. So over the summer, we met once she was placed in this role in the spring to say, what are those next steps of transparency that we might continue? As we've heard, parents want more transparency. So those are the things we did last year. What can we move forward with? We have been in communication with some surrounding districts and some of the things that they are doing around transparency, and then are coming to you tonight with several different scenarios of things that we are looking for your feedback and your thinking on, like this looks like a good idea, this one maybe not so much, and just to have some dialogue around that. So I'll turn it over to Nicole. Just want to briefly introduce yourself to the board.
Okay, so I've been with the district for 23 years. I grew up in Hudsonville, but I didn't go to Hudsonville. I went to a Christian school. Yeah, I have background as a middle school ELA teacher, a school librarian at middle school levels for both middle schools, and then also as a grade teacher. And now I'm very excited to step back into the library world, but it felt a little strange today without lots of little people around me. There's very big people around me today.
Your office is here.
So just into the options? Okay, so for transparency in the school media centers, that is pretty easy. Our media software allows us to do a few things. It allows us to track history. So one option would be that parents at any time could access the list of books their child has checked out from the library. So that's one option. It's a little bit of a reactive approach, but it still lets parents see what their kids have been reading if they're not talking about it with their kids. Another scenario would be that we could make our library catalog available publicly so that, provided a link, parents could see the books that are in the library. That is highly transparent. It's a proactive approach, like parents have the option to go in and decide what they believe is right or not right for their child. Based on that, we could possibly come up with a situation in which parents could request that certain titles be restricted for their children. So that would.
I'm sorry, Nicole, but that's you described the scenario A right now.
That's scenario A right now.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry, I went out.
That's right.
So what questions might you have about that? Do you need more information?
And that one on here looks like it could be done quickly.
Yeah.
That one yes, so I'm refreshing myself on the library software with lots of help from our tech department, but that could be done reasonably quickly. As far as restricting access to certain items, that would require a little bit more specific work to make sure that we have a consistent form across the district. But that feels like a healthy balance because it allows parents agency to decide what's right for their child, but then everybody still has lots of access to a variety of materials.
So would that be something that would automatically happen if that student went to check out that book? There would be a little warning? Or is it actually like a paper document that would have to be checked?
So we can put in a note in their account. So if my child went to check out a book, he would say his name or give his student ID. And when his patron record popped up, then an alert would pop up for whomever is there, whether it's a media center para or in some buildings, the media centers, the checkout is done by volunteers. So whoever is checking out the books would just see that note that says, Susie Smith is not allowed to read The Cat in the Hat.
So at least it would take some of the additional burden out of the hands of the media center person once that information is inputted in for review or whatever. Okay.
Nicole, in looking at scenarios A and B, are they mutually exclusive or is there a both and?
There's a both and.
Because to me, if both A and B could be implemented relatively quickly, which is allow parents access to the library and allow parents access to see what their children are checking out from the library, I think that resolves the transparency concerns.
It still would not stop a child from coming in here and reading a book and not leaving with it, not checking it out. It was the same question you had about in the classroom.
Right, that could both happen.
I think the other piece that I would just maybe point out and then just ask Nicole to expound upon it if needed, but is that we wouldn't want to get in a situation, we would want parents to be able to say specifically, this is the title that I do not want my child to read, which would be very different than saying I don't want my child to read a certain genre or topics, and those would be some of those things that connect back to that Title IX, or the Title IX conversations that we've had about books and the legal updates and so forth. So we would want to proceed with caution around some of that and be able to say, I don't want my child to read Cat in the Hat, or a list of any 10 books or something like that. Anything that you would add to that, staying away from?
The more specific we can ask parents to be in their selection about what they would like to restrict their students from, the better, because I don't want to put any of my library parents in the position of trying to decide what another parent feels is appropriate, or trying to interpret that.
What is hard, and I don't know the solution to this unless you develop a rubric and evaluate books. I was just looking at a list of books, and I went to Common Sense Media, and after my 3 reviews for the day, I couldn't see any more reviews after that. And the reviews are more general. They don't necessarily get specific in regards to content that a parent might be opposed to. So to just sometimes have a title, it's really hard because I don't know where you can find good information about that book. Because Common Sense Media, after you look at 3 reviews for a day, unless you buy a subscription,
Some booksellers like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, if you look online, you can actually see editorial reviews, professional reviews from what they call standard review services, School Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Hornbook.
but they're very generic. They don't necessarily address the issues that a parent would be opposed to. As the ones that I've been looking at. Like, I would never know that this issue contained what was contained in the book. I wouldn't know. I'm just bringing that up.
Right, I guess I don't really know the solution to that. That's always been the case with maintaining a school or classroom library, is that we try to make informed decisions from trusted sources, and then sometimes we do get a book that we get and read and realize, oh, this probably isn't the best fit. So.
Are there networks, Nicole, of that Are there networks of school librarians? I'm sorry, I'm condensing your title down to
No.
that. But are there networks of school librarians and so forth where, in those situations where there's not a very deep review of the book that flags some of the concerns and whatever, that deep review doesn't exist, there are networks out there that go, okay, we're looking at this book, what do you think? You know, so-and-so over in, you know, Billings, Montana, or whatever. you know.
There are state level, like, media specialists, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
professional organizations, and there are national level ones.
Okay. So that's another source that, that may be available to you to provide information around those,
Right.
particularly information.
Good with library center possibilities?
I'm sorry.
Good with library center
School
possibilities,
libraries.
school libraries.
So
Yeah,
the-
I think so. I mean, they're good, yeah.
Well, I guess, are we making any decisions about that? Or?
Those are decisions that we make with your feedback.
You're kinda
So I
looking for
think,
direction,
yeah,
kind of feedback.
these are not board decisions. We don't need to take a vote on whether or not we turn on both
Alexandria,
systems.
yeah.
I think our feeling is that the pulse of the board is we need to work this direction and get the transparency on what's in the media settings and what kids are checking out.
Yeah, I like how you laid out the goals of transparency and parent agency, and then you, as you walk through these options, you're fitting those to those goals, and, yeah. I think I'm hearing consensus around the table that continue on with that direction.
So that would be the easy one with the school libraries.
A little bit more.
The classroom libraries are a little bit more complex.
Just a quick question. Is
Yeah.
it possible to leave this up on the screen?
This document,
Yeah. Just for other people to see. You didn't kind of see what we're talking
It's
about.
hard regardless, there's a lot of.
there's a lot of
There's a lot of words, yes.
Do you have that? Or do you want me to wait for them to pull that up, or is it okay? Okay, so classroom libraries, it's a little trickier because in our school libraries, all of our items are already cataloged. They're already within our software system. In our classroom libraries, each teacher right now has their own way of managing their own classroom library. So that makes it a little bit trickier for the transparency piece. They can't just turn on access with click the button like I can with our collection. So there are a few different scenarios. One scenario would be that teachers manage their own libraries and use maybe like an open source software that does not allow some of the same options as, it's not as specific as the school library software. It wouldn't allow parents maybe the ability to access. All right, I'm gonna make sure that I'm going in order that's on my page. And I'm very nervous, I don't usually present to the board. I usually present to fifth graders, so.
You're fine.
All right, so that would be the scenario. Each teacher uses their own system. There's pros and cons. The pros are that teacher buy-in is higher because they're using their own system. Some cons to that is that there's a little bit less agency for parents. It's a little clunkier maybe for parents to have to navigate many different systems. Like if my student has one teacher for English this try and a different teacher the next try, and they're using different systems, that's harder for me as a parent. It is a time commitment. Teachers' plates are full, and it takes many man hours, woman hours, person hours to enter all of that in. Like there would be a cost. We would have to probably purchase some scanners for them to enter everything in, and we would probably have to pay them for their time.
Although we have very active parent-teacher associations, so they have volunteers potentially. Could we leverage our parent volunteers to do data entry?
Yeah, a piece of that can be tricky is your classroom libraries in your classroom where you're teaching class all day.
Right.
So, I mean,
it would have to be like.
there would possibly be some workarounds. So there is possibly that. And the other piece with that is when if a teacher leaves, even even if they leave all their books behind, their account goes with them if it's their own account in whatever system they're using. So then if teacher A left and teacher B came in, teacher B would need to re-enter anything that had already been left there. Like if teachers each choose their own system, there's not a continuity like that. Scenario B would be that every teacher uses a consistent platform. That makes it a little bit easier for parents. One thing that can be, I don't want to say worrisome, but it can be an area of concern is that teachers feel very vulnerable. They don't want to be pitted against one another as far as what books might be in the library. So that can feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes if a parent is going through and saying, well, teacher A has this book and that book and this book, and teacher B has all books by this author that I love. So I think we just want to be mindful of that.
And I think
Go ahead.
we've seen that play out, right? I mean, I think I'm just going to name the elephant in the room is that we've seen that play out where teachers have a book in their room that somebody doesn't think is an appropriate book, but many other parents do think it's an appropriate book. And that plays out then to say if it's in my classroom that Amy Taylor is a bad person because I have that book in my room. And so I feel very strongly that we do need to protect our teachers. They are professionals. They make decisions about what books go in their classroom based on knowing their students and all of those values that we all hold as public school employees. And so I will name that elephant, and I will acknowledge that that is something that I think we need to move forward when we're talking about this to ensure that we are quite frankly protecting our teachers.
And I certainly want us to do that, but the whole book issue first came to me because of the classroom. Because a teacher brought an open classroom, which was quite frankly explicit, and had terms I wasn't sure was defined correctly. So I want to pet the teachers, I appreciate that. But yet, however, I want the students to do that.
I do too, and I think.
And so what is the parent's responsibility in that? And part of me says, okay, we have open houses, we have communication with teachers and parents. Can a parent have access to every classroom before the start of school to look through what books are in the classroom and determine if there's something they object to? I mean, I'm totally for parents being involved. It's one of the three things that I've always said I believe needs to be happening. And I was one of those parents who was involved. And there were things that I didn't want for my kids. And I had them removed from seeing certain movies that were part of a curriculum because I knew how my child was. But I also took final responsibility for making sure I knew what was happening, which is why I really believe in the transparency part of it. But I also understand that we are asking teachers to do additional work that for the first time around might be complete, but that also means it continues on each year after that. And so, to Amy's point, I agree, there has to be a medium ground. And it is not that I don't want parents to know what's going on. And it's not that I don't think there is some violence and sexual material that probably shouldn't be in the hands of high schoolers. That's not it. I feel very strongly that some of those materials maybe not be appropriate. But our teachers are professionals. Our parents should be working closely with our teachers. And there are some parents who never will. And what about those students? We can put all these things into place, but if there's a parent who chooses to not get involved, how does it help that student?
Scenario C is a neighboring district does this. All of their classroom library books are entered into Alexandria. And when you search, that's our library software that we use for our school libraries. And then if you search the catalog for a certain title, like if I wanted to see if Cat in the Hat is in the library, I could search Cat in the Hat, and then it would give me the call number in the high school library, and then it would also say classroom library. That can be set up that it just states whether it's in a classroom library or school library, which kind of eliminates that, not competition is the right word, but comparison, scrutiny for individual teachers. Another pro of that is that it's a consistent platform, so if parents learn to search the school library, they also can know how to search the classroom library. The databases are set up by building, so if I had a student at Georgetown, searching the Georgetown library would look just the same as searching the Baldwin Street library, and that would look just the same as searching the high school library, just I would have to visit different links for each of those three libraries. If teachers were to also use Alexandria to check out their books, you could also do the same restriction I talked about earlier that we could do in the classroom library, or in the school library. Some cons is that this scenario is the most costly. All the books would need to be barcoded. You couldn't just use the barcode that's printed on the book. You would need to do a barcode label. You would need then a scanner to enter the books. And if we chose the scenario and opted to have teachers run their classroom library checkout through Alexandria, they would also each need a scanner. The personnel scanners are available for about $30 to $50 each, but times every ELA classroom in the district. We would have to pay somebody to enter the books. Can we say which district we have that in communication with? Okay. We've been in communication with Byron Center, who started this several years ago, more with an eye toward asset management of books that were in their classroom libraries, so that if teachers left, suddenly the whole library that had been paid for by school money had left. So it has been a long process. I think it took 5 years to do the classroom libraries at the high school and middle schools. Just the high school. This summer they had 400 hours a week happening between some student workers and some, I think, certified staff. They got the intermediate school and one elementary were on the calendar for this summer, and that work is not completed. So it is really time consuming to do it this way, and there's the expense of you have to keep people.
The information is a little different in the packet. They had grades 7 through 12, took 5 years to complete. You referenced just high school, and this summer was allocated for 3 elementaries and 1 intermediate building.
It was my understanding that the high school took 5 years.
And they allocated this summer, they hope to do 3 elementaries and 1 intermediate building, but 1 intermediate building and 1 elementary is what actually was able to be completed in that time. I am a little bit unclear there, and I followed up, but I did not hear back yet whether classroom teachers are using Alexandria to check out the books to their students, if they're using that for circulation, or if they're just using that to keep a catalog that's easily searchable by parents.
Now, it's my understanding Jennison is implementing something as well. Did you know what Jennison is doing?
Jennison is using a different system based on some teachers who are using that currently in their district to check out books. I think it's called Library.
Yeah, I just got the information on that late yesterday, and I haven't had much time to dig into it.
Yeah, and I've had contact with their curriculum leader in Jennison. They are paying teachers to complete the work, and they are also not a Readers and Writers Workshop district, and so I think that has also implications for the number of books in classrooms and some of the instructional practices that they use around books. So we have had conversation with them. They're using a different system to increase the transparency at their district as well.
Now that the fan has started, it's very hard to hear. Can you all speak up a little bit, please? I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was just really hard to hear you.
Test.
Better?
I think our teachers are very busy, and to expect them to enter books, I don't think is realistic.
Can you use a microphone, please?
So I think our teachers. Okay. Is it still not? That's right. So I think our teachers are very busy, and to expect them to enter books is not realistic. That's not what we're paying for their expertise. I question that we have a lot of very active parent-teacher associations in all of the schools, not really the high school, but is there a way to leverage volunteers to do some of this work? I don't know, I'm just asking. When we think outside the box.
I think any idea is worth exploring. I think that because we are just getting some details around how the system might work and some of that, that's something that we can consider. I think that Nicole mentioned the idea of when would that work happen then? Would that happen in the evenings? Would that happen on the weekends? What are the logistics of all of that? We would have to nail down some of those specifics.
And then we are still asking our teachers to be here in the evening and on the weekends. Like, I don't think as a classroom teacher, I would have been like, oh, there's people coming in to catalog my library, can you have fun? Like, I would have stayed there.
So are we, I think there was general alignment on the Alexandria for the library media centers.
I heard that as well. I heard that both scenario
Is that
A
fair
and
to
B, that if we could make those lists available, as well as provide an opportunity for parents to have login access in Alexandria for the media centers, that we could move forward with those pieces and a process for them to specifically request a specific title not be checked out by their child.
And I think what I'm hearing is that when you're talking to Jennison, you're talking to Byron Center, you're asking some more questions about what they're doing and how they're doing it, and trying to get some more information. And maybe they looked at parent-teacher clubs and learned some things that we can learn from. And so, to me, I like the idea of everything in Alexandria, just from an ease of, once it's in there, it's all in one system, it's easier to manage and so forth. So that intuitively makes sense to me, but I understand what you're saying, there may be some roadblocks, or some, there may be some, there's some things we gotta take into account if we do that from a cost standpoint, time standpoint, so.
So what I'm hearing you say is, go ahead with the school library transparency and know that the classroom library transparency is going to be an ongoing process that we are working toward.
Well, for me, and I want to hear from the rest of the board, for me, I like the idea of it all being in Alexandria. But I think, yeah, you've got part of it. Sounds like identified. It sounds like we got to learn some more from some other folks who are doing it around the classroom library options. Is that fair? Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I like the idea of having everything cataloged through Alexander's system, but I would say 100% of the concerns that I hear are about sexually explicit material. Nobody's complaining about the Bible or Mein Kampf or any other books. It's about sexually explicit material. And this might be a more difficult job if the administration and or the board could come up with some guidelines for sexually explicit material, which could be handed out to teachers and to all of us, so we know that we're just not going to mess with these books. That we read the book, we see stuff in there, that we wouldn't say it out loud, we couldn't get into our system through the internet, and so it should not be in our books. Now that might be a bigger challenge, but I think the issue I'm hearing is sexually explicit material.
But are we also hearing the issue around transparency, though? I mean, I'm not
Yes,
disagreeing with you that the sexually and violent explicit material is a key thing, but are we also hearing, we'd like to understand, we'd like more transparency around, so are they two,
They go
they're
to- yeah, they
related, but they're two different problem statements?
Yeah, they go together because there's a feeling, and I don't know how broad this is, there's a feeling that there's not complete transparency about sexually explicit material.
Right.
That's the heart of the concern that I'm hearing from parents, sexually explicit material.
Sure.
And I think we have to come to some way of defining what that is. And just to be saying to our teachers, you've got a good head on your shoulders, you should be smart enough to know. You wouldn't read this to your grandchildren, you wouldn't read it at a family gathering, you wouldn't read it in church, you wouldn't read it at a board meeting. So why would we have it in our buildings?
Just holding it like this makes it look like I'm going to talk, and I wasn't at all the chat, but you go first.
Well, I agree with Mark that it's worth our effort to spend some time coming up with what a definition for sexually explicit material means, because I think it does mean different things to different people. And I think that there's a threshold that is certainly objectionable to all people. I think there's other thresholds that are objectionable to some people, and I think we need to help understand what we need as a board and as a district when we define that. In the meantime, I appreciate this dialogue. I think I'll just go on record that I support whatever level of transparency makes parents comfortable that they have knowledge of what their children have access to and are reading. And in this interim period, while we're working on solutions, whether it's Alexandria or others, I think reinforcing with teachers that they create that opportunity and space for parents to have that dialogue with their child's teacher, that if they have specific expectations or thresholds as a parent, that they have the ability to express that to the child's teacher, and then partner with the child's teacher. You know, I know I've had personal experiences with my sixth grader last year. There was a book that she brought home that I think 95% of the people in this room would find to be a perfectly fine book, but for her, that book was objectionable to me and to her. And I contacted the teacher, who immediately offered 3 different options of different texts, and it was resolved very quickly. The teacher was very apologetic. She had nothing to apologize for. I'm sure it was a perfectly fine book to most people, just it didn't work for my daughter and my family. And I think we need to create the opportunity for that dialogue and that transparency. And then in the long run, I do think solutions, whether it's Alexandria or other solutions, I appreciate that in pursuing those solutions. I agree we're looking for things that do not add undue burden onto our teachers, recognizing they're always strapped and they're already very busy. I think that there are ways to bring other resources to support the work, but I think it can start with ensuring that transparency and that dialogue between teachers and parents about any concerns that parents might have for their kids, and that ability to have that dialogue with teachers, particularly elementary school age, where they can say, I'm concerned if my children are going to be reading this type of material or something else. To Mark's point, I have heard some concerns beyond just sexually explicit. I think violence for some families is a trigger. And I think that there are other triggers that families have, perhaps based on religious beliefs or other beliefs that they have concerns about, and every parent deserves the right to have that dialogue with their child's teacher.
Absolutely, and I think that the letters that go home at the beginning of the school year, so parents in the room, please be looking for those letters. That is the perfect opportunity, and that is a true invitation from the teacher to say, you know your child best at this time, and so reach out to me if you'd like to have conversation about what books might be appropriate or not appropriate for them. And so I think then those other layers of transparency that we currently have in place also lend themselves to that. And quite honestly, that's what our teachers have done for years. And I think they've done that well and always come alongside any family and said, we want to partner with you. We don't know your child, you know them best. So we certainly invite that type of dialogue. The other pieces that I would mention around sexually explicit is when we look at some of the legal guidance that we've received, and I know we've had this conversation before, but I will say it again, it's often about the book as a whole, right? And that's what we continue to hear from legal guidance. It's not excerpts, it's the book as a whole, and that is really where our review committee lands as well, with the final decisions around taking a book as a whole, which is why we read the entire book. There are definitions. I've shared the document with you before, but I'm happy to do it again to expound upon your dialogue that you'd like to have about what might be sexually explicit. There are some legal definitions of what pornography is and what obscenity is that are contained in a document that comes right from legal guidance. So I'm happy to reshare that with you.
I think that works great when the teacher's been in their classroom for a while, but we have how many new teachers, and they've inherited how many classroom libraries. And we even have in our book guidelines, it's not feasible for the teacher to necessarily know the content of all the books in their room. That's why I think it's important to have something like Alexandria or something, because it's not, the teacher might not know the content of all the books in their room, which would make it hard to guide a child if the parents had a specific concerns.
So I think what I'm hearing, tell me if I'm wrong, is continue down the technology, investigating the technology solutions, and understand that and what it'll take to implement those and so on. We can revisit that. But I think you're also hearing from the board and not that we're not doing this today, but that emphasis on that teacher, parent, child connection, and reinforcing that, like the example Chad used around parents call your teachers, teachers connect with your parents, and let's make sure that relationship is good and strong. And then we continue to look at, so if you could resend those documents, Amy, I know we've looked at them in the past, but if you could resend them around sexually explicit violence, obscenity, those definitions, that information that we reviewed before, I think would be a good refresher for the board as we continue to wrestle with this. That would be helpful. Did I capture all that? Okay?
We'll also resend the book guidelines. They're online. We'll
Yes.
resend those. I know Margaret made a comment about how books get in.
Yeah.
And that's in that process that we've revamped too. So that
Right.
was what we went through last year, but we'll resend that also so you can look at that.
Revisit that. Okay, good. Okay, now did you want to talk about multi-tiered systems as well?
We do.
Okay, you got it.
Nicole is going to trade places with Captain Lovenex.
I'm sorry.
We have a document that Robin is sharing with you now. It was also in your packet that was shared on Friday. And a couple of you heard me talk about this at our opening day.
Is the fan still on back there? I can't hear it. Okay. So never-
But I do want everyone to hear me. I will try my best to use the microphone. So some of you heard me share this presentation with all of our staff at our welcome back. I will start on the side that talks about the role of multi-tiered systems of support, and you'll notice the blue circle that says district improvement. So by way of reminder, all of this dialogue around multi-tiered systems of support has been really happening for a decade or more across schools, public schools, and here in Hudsonville, there has been a push for enhancing some of those processes and procedures for many years. Last year, as part of our COVID relief consultation period with all of our stakeholders, when Andy Secor was going around doing all of the meaningful consultation and pulling groups to talk about what our stakeholders would like us to do with COVID relief dollars, there was a strong emphasis to enhance academic supports and behavior supports. And so that then created this opportunity in our district to increase our positive behavior intervention and supports services, as well as our academic specialists in each building. And so all of those new hires have come to you over the last many months. We have academic specialists in each of our buildings, and we've increased our PBIS specialists at the middle school level with those COVID relief funds. As part of this process, however, I think we've been trying to be really explicitly clear with ourselves and with all of our staff and administrators about the importance of the roles and the various systems that we have. You've heard me talk about enhancing the systems and creating sustainable systems of multi-tiered systems of support. And so there are a lot of pieces on this document that are tied together. And so I'll go over the one side and then pass the microphone to Kathy to talk about the multi-tiered systems of support specifically. You'll notice that on the side where it says district improvement, continuous improvement team, this will be improvement team that will be developed this year. We currently don't have a district continuous improvement team, and so that will be a newly developed team with the members that are stated there. Moving then to school continuous improvement teams with members of both PBIS teams as well as academic collaborative teams will be members. You can see the arrows are really representing the communication of back and forth of how that comes from our district continuous improvement team, our strategic planning process right down to the school level, and then the individual levels as well. I'll pause there and take any questions that you might have. I know you probably had a chance to look at this even before this evening, and then I'll turn it to Kathy if you don't have any other questions.
The one that was in our packet is a little different from the one that Robert gave
Flip
us.
it over.
I know, but this,
Well-
it's a little different. There's,
The items that you're noticing are different, we'll talk about when we get to that side. Are you noticing items that are different on this side? Or,
no,
Okay.
this one, so like under curriculum,
yes,
on the
Well-
one that was in our board packet, we have math and literacy,
correct,
and then on this one, we have DAC added.
correct.
Okay.
Yep,
So
we'll address, yeah, can we pause on that side, because Kathy will go over those changes, and
Yeah, okay.
Are there
So
any-
is this the one that we need to be looking at?
the big one that you just got, yes. Are there any questions about district improvement, school improvement, the school PBIS team, or the academic collaborative team?
How does district improvement, can you differentiate between district continuous improvement team and SOAR goals, and kind of talk about that just a little bit?
Absolutely.
What the outcomes, what the desired maybe metrics, whatever, the district improvement team.
Sure, so the district improvement team, like I said, has not been formed yet, and so the state obligates districts to have a district improvement plan as well as school improvement plans at each building. That's not new, but the processes are new of what that continuous improvement, what those teams will be doing. From how does a district improvement team connect with strategic goals and plans? I think that they are interconnected. I think that when we pull together a district continuous improvement team, we'll be looking at various levels of data to determine what specific goals we'll be moving forward with, right down to the school level. So some of that data and some of that work certainly may funnel from strategic plans as well, when you're talking about teaching and learning and improvements of academic progress and as well as behavior. So I think they are very much connected.
Okay, good. Thank
Any other questions on that side of the graphic? So this is Kathy Lewandowski. She is our MTSS coordinator. So I would just invite her to introduce herself a little bit and then walk through the items on the other side, the role of the multi-tiered systems of support.
Sure. So I've been in education for 32 years now. 29 have been in the classroom, mostly in the upper elementary grades. Came to Hudsonville in January of 2020. And am now an MTSS district coordinator, and I'm super excited for this work and very passionate about it as well. All right, first of all, I'd like to draw your attention to the updates. So you have the most recent copy. And so we did add the diversity and advocacy work to the quadrants that you see on that side. We admitted them by error. Being part of the strategic plan and knowing the importance of the non-academic work to help all students feel safe and supported, we wanted to make sure that it was represented here. And then in the curriculum quadrant, we had, before PK through 12 instruction in math and literacy, we've taken off that qualification because we recognize that in the tiered system and in tier 1, we have universal supports for all students and in all subjects. So it would apply to all. All right, so I'm going to direct your attention now to just below the mission. I'm going to read this little section to you. We believe that in order for this to happen, this being the mission of Hudsonville Public Schools, that curriculum and special services must come together to provide learning, supports, services, and programs around both academic and non-academic needs. So those learning support services and programs, academic are in the yellow curriculum section, and then non-academic in the pink special services section. Now we'll move to the middle of the document where you see multi-tiered systems of support. In order to help teams provide students with the right supports around the right content and skills at the right time, Hudsonville Public Schools utilizes an MTSS structure that focuses on both academics and behavior SEL. So you see the triangle here is that system. So you have the tiers represented in colors there. So tier 1 is universal supports for all students, and This is the core instruction that happens in all of our classes and the supports around essential grade level standards and learning. And then that yellow section, tier 2, is targeted additional support to master those standards. And those are for some of those students. So tier 1 is all students, tier 2, some students, and then tier 3, intensive, would be a few students who need intensive support and prior grade level skills. And then the circles around the edge there, these are our roles that have been developed and continue to be developed to support this meaningful work. So we have a color coding system. The yellow circles are staff that are supporting the academic needs of all students. And then the pink are those staff members that are supporting academic and non-academic needs of all the students. You will notice that the academic specialist and the PBIS specialist, their pie chunks look a little bit different. So the larger portion of the academic specialists, really, not only are we focused on the sustainability of our systems well into the future, but the academic specialist is also coordinating parapros and supporting our students, and so they have a larger volume of people. Questions, Madam? Yeah, Barb.
Just a couple clarifying questions. Tier 1
Yes.
says all students.
Yes.
Is that K through 12, all students? The reason why I ask is under curriculum and under special services, we have SEL under both. It's my understanding SEL is currently a pilot in K through 5, correct? Okay. So is the intent then to do SEL K through 12? Because there's SEL throughout this document. And it's currently a pilot, so how can we put, and I don't see draft on this, so how can we put SEL when it's still a pilot? Or not, or at least not identify that it's pilot K through 5 right now? I guess I'm confused.
So you're confused about, let me just ask a clarifying question.
Yeah.
So are you saying you're confused about why SEL curriculum is listed under curriculum?
Under there and special services, and then you have an arrow that goes to the 3 tiers. Tier 1 is all students. All students means K through 12.
Sure.
But yet our SEL is being a pilot,
Correct.
K through 5.
I think that overall, there are many social emotional learning supports at all levels. And so your detail around is SEL curriculum pre-K-12 or is it K-12 is a legitimate question. I think when we're talking about SEL that you see on the document, we support students socially, emotionally in lots of different ways outside of just curriculum. So your point, if it would make you feel better, we certainly could put SEL curriculum pre-K-5, if that feels like that would be more clear to you.
But then it doesn't address the tier 1, which is all students.
If I could just add something to that, I think that we are in the pilot phase with the ruler curriculum specifically, but when we kind of talk about the broader term of social emotional learning, we are inclusive of all of the other practices that we hope to support through positive behavior intervention supports, trauma-informed practices, and the other ways that we might support all students in their social emotional development. So when I think about SEL, I think of it as a larger umbrella, and currently we're piloting a specific curriculum, K-5 through the ruler curriculum. So just the terminology there would be differentiating those acronyms. Does that provide any clarity?
It is a bit confusing.
Okay.
I will say, Wednesday when this was presented, I had someone that came up to me after the meeting and said, had I seen this before? And I said, no.
But isn't SEL part of our SOAR goals overall? Yes. And to me, that's what you're trying to express, is that the SOAR goals we implemented 2 years ago included the social emotional learning of students. And that's what I see is carried out here, carrying out what we had as a board several years ago, approved as our SOAR goals, maybe a sub-bullet under SEL curriculum, current, ruler pilot K to 5. But the overall request by this board through the SOAR goals was that we start working on social emotional learning at all levels.
Yeah, maybe the term curriculum is, I mean, SEL could be a student visits a counselor to get some support. When the student was unfortunately killed a couple of weeks ago, a student visiting a counselor would also constitute social emotional, right? I'm feeling very down, I'm feeling very sad about this, I don't know if I want to come back to school, I want to go visit a counselor and get some further, that's also SEL, right?
Absolutely.
But that's not a curriculum, it's a method that, it's a support, so.
It's listed under special services as mental health. That's where I would categorize that.
Yep, yeah, my point was that SEL curriculum, the curriculum phrase there may be a confusing phrase because we are piloting ruler, and obviously we want to make a decision on ruler, and then that will help inform us and guide us on other curriculum around SEL or not, or we want to stop at, behavioral mental services if there's something like that. So.
And I think that just reflecting what Dawn said, because those are strategic planning goals, that is then the connection to the larger piece when we talk about district improvement, connecting to SOAR goals and so forth. So we can certainly add a caveat underneath SEL curriculum to say kind of 3K5 right now, if that would make things more clear.
Well, we've always been concerned about social concerns and behavioral concerns. That's been universal in my history of the board, at least here. I think unless there's another curriculum, I think the only curriculum I'm aware of for SEL is ruler.
That's our current pilot, yes.
Yeah, so that would appear to be across the board here, K-12, and we're only doing the pilot. So I think
sure, I can add that
pilot
bullet.
work there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the wording probably is a little confusing.
Sure.
What I have, and this might be a Mandy question, DAC, how is that differentiated from our former focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, or is that something new?
I think that feedback on the title of that work in that committee was just that there were some key terms there that felt that they meant something that was controversial, and we wanted to continue to focus around how do we support diversity and safe and supportive environments for students in protected classes. So that theme has stayed the same, but this past year that committee was sort of redesigned to make sure that that was inclusive of stakeholders with a variety of perspectives on these issues.
Because I know, and I know that diversity, equity, inclusion have become code words. I don't know places, but in some places they become code words and saying something which we might not want to say. This one.
Can you expand on the differences, or talk to the differences between instructional coaches and academic specialists?
Yeah, so I was an instructional coach. So I worked basically with Tier 1 teachers around instructional practices, where the academic specialist will be doing a lot of systems work and coordinating the MTSS system within that building, and also supporting the system not only in Tier 1, but Tier 2 and Tier 3, and also equipping those teachers and parapros to be familiar with intervention materials and also provide interventions.
So a classroom focus versus a building cross
What do kids need? Yeah.
district focus. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
If I can just add to that, the MTSS, or the academic specialists, will be really co-facilitating a lot of the work that happens in this academic collaborative team. So that is a team of teachers and administrators who will come together at regular intervals to review data. And so that is different than an instructional coach who focuses and supports teachers with instructional practices in their classroom.
This document was made with, over the course of many months, with administrators giving lots of feedback and stakeholders taking a look at it. And so we appreciate your feedback here today. I think the only piece of clarification that I am noting that we can request to be updated would be just to add underneath SEL curriculum, a caveat or a bullet or something to indicate pre-K through 5th grade at this time.
And do any of these, let me see, as we work to improve all students academically and support all students behaviorally, are there some of these positions that you'd ideally like to say, 10 years from now, we don't need this or we don't need that, because rising tide has lifted all boats and we're just in a better place than we were post-COVID, and.
I think that's a great question, and I think that as we come together and more clearly define those specific outcomes, Andy Secor is going to be working with us to more clearly define that, along with our district improvement team as well as our school improvement teams, define what those outcomes are. I think there will always be kids who need academic support and behavioral support, but I would say that if we could get the systems, I guess in theory, if we can get the systems up and running and increase all of our knowledge and skill about what the systems are to support all students in those ways, that maybe we wouldn't need as many. But we may also find, wow, having these additional layers have produced double the outcomes that we were able to produce previously. And so I think that those are some of the things that will ensure that we are tracking right from the onset.
Yeah, and you touched on what I was really getting there. You spoke to it's the outcomes.
Yeah.
That's what those outcomes are. So as we figure those out and firm those up, we can review those again as a board and take a look at those and make sure.
And that will be
aligned
ultimately the work of this district improvement team, along with then, like I said, Andy Secor, because he's the state and federal program coordinator. He'll be working with Kathy and building administrators, taking a look at our current data and figuring out where we want to go.
Okay. And then those outcomes may tie into our district metrics snapshot.
Absolutely.
So there's
that connection.
as well. Yeah. Okay, good. Good.
So just for my clarification, Amy, you're going to add KQ5 pilot underneath SEL?
You would like me to add pilot as well?
So it is a pilot, it's not approved unless I missed something.
Those are great pilot.
Okay, pre-K through 5 pilot.
And then is the intention for that to go K through 12?
We have not had any further dialogue about that at this time. Mandy, do you want to say more about that?
Because this graph indicates it would be for tier 1.
Yes, I think the strategic goal is encompassing of all students to support them in that way. There has not been a development of a new committee to look at options for 6-12. That has not started for.
But the goal is to go that direction.
Yeah, and that's not specific to ruler again, but to look at all options to support social emotional learning.
Okay, any other questions on our teaching and learning?
I like the fact that you added the mission statement to the top of this, because I think it's sometimes hard, it's easy to overlook that, and when you really parse it down, our goal is to educate, challenge, and inspire all learners to become contributing, responsible members of a global society. It again reminds us that as our world gets smaller, there are more and more things that we want to prepare our kids for. So thank you for including that. I had kind of forgotten that mission statement, so I appreciate seeing that on your materials.
You're going to see it again.
Yeah? Okay.
Okay, move on to district metrics snapshot.
So we've been trying to come up with a snapshot to give the board maybe an update every month when we sit down of just information on where we are as a district. So we put together kind of a draft of it's a fairly rough draft of something that we'd like to share with the board on a monthly basis of where we are. This will change based on time of year when we get results from MSTEP data or SAT data or evaluation cycles, a number of staff hires, all of those different components. So I don't know how much time to spend tonight other than please take a look at this and say, what else would you like to know if you were to sit down at a month at a glance? We came up with Stratosphere only because of eagles and stratosphere. It's not, that's about as creative as we got, so I'm really sorry for the title of it. But Eagle Eye was already taken by the high school staff, so we couldn't do that. But just kind of it's a snapshot. These numbers are accurate to what you would see here, but these are maybe not the numbers that we'd be looking for trend data. We also want to add, a number of AP offerings that we have for students, number of students that are taking AP classes, maybe dual enrolled students. If you were to sit down and you were to leave this meeting and then be asked by a parent at Meyer or Yemen or anywhere, hey, do you know that there are 46 kids in my second grade class? You can say, well, actually, no, we average about 21 in second grade, things like that. How can you be more informed on where we are from a snapshot of the district? So maybe I'm just sharing this with you tonight, give you an idea. I know I've talked to Ken and Barb a lot about what we want this to kind of look like. We could hand you a 5-page document. We're trying to keep it to 1 page. And I know I can pass my glasses around if the font gets too small, but we want to keep it to 1 snapshot so you can have a general idea of where we are. And again, it might fluctuate. September's might always look the same, and you'll start to see trend data. But there'll be other things that'll be on there on a regular basis on where we are and how we rank. And you'll see some comparisons with other districts, with like districts, and some other information we'd like to add. And we have a little bit of, I'll say, white space in the bottom right-hand corner to remove that graphic and fill that up with other content. But this was kind of a first, I'll say, shot across the bow to say what that might look like.
So when we look at trends, like I'm looking at the student mental health, I would be very interested in seeing that trended, because I would hope with the support that we're providing that some of those numbers would go down. Do you envision having more than 1 column so that you can visually look at trends?
Yeah, so you might look at it over a period of a month or two. You might look at it as cycles when we ask kids. Maybe it's we ask them twice a year a question. We get that information. And obviously, we'll have to put context to it. If the world shifts beneath our feet, that changes things also. But yes, in several of these, you look at some and it might turn into a different type of graph, so you can see trend over time or same time of year and what that looks like. So maybe every fall you see numbers, and then every winter you see numbers, and the trends would be similar.
One of the things that we probably won't be able to get data on, but I think a lot of parents are either concerned about or wonder about with the way things have occurred since 2008, because that's when my last one graduated and was another teaching job. Can you imagine that? I mean, really, is how prepared are our students when they leave here? And prepared could be prepared for college, prepared for jobs, and maybe that's not even anything you could actually measure right out of high school. I don't know if we have any data that comes in, but how did my kid end up? Are they someone who can't handle the world? Are they someone who were to be successful in whatever field they wanted to be in? Did they know how to start a small business? Are they prepared to be an upstanding citizen? I don't know, but I think that's something that overall, as a parent, that's something that I know I always thought of.
Well, having an 18-year-old high school senior, he is not ready. But the high school exit survey information is stuff that we can add on here too, so we get information from kids 5 years out of what did that look like.
Okay, I think that would be helpful to say to people.
Got it.
Do we have a statistic on student participation in extracurricular activities?
We do.
I'd like to see that trend too.
And Doug, just for practice, because we've had a couple of these tonight, wouldn't we have something, I mean, we know this is preliminary, can you throw a draft, the word draft?
It is. It just didn't copy that way. There's a huge
yeah.
draft on it. When I
Oh,
printed it,
okay,
it didn't
well,
say draft on it.
all right.
So
It's
you
like
can
a
hold it up to the
watermark or
light.
something, okay.
it.
All
Can
right,
you
so,
see it? I know it's on. Yeah, I can see it.
a minor point, okay.
Gotta
I was telling Doug the other thing that, one thought, I like, we need trend data on here, obviously. And then I always think about metrics in terms of, your car dashboard. There's some things you're checking a lot. You're checking your speed all the time, unless you got it on cruise maybe, but you're checking your speed. And then there are other things that you kind of glance at periodically. Do I have enough fuel? Is the engine like or not? So that's another thing to think about, is what those metrics are that we should be checking periodically, and which ones we say, okay, well, this one we would not expect to see any change over a year, so no reason to look at it month to month or quarter to quarter. And then another thought, are we benchmarking other districts to see what they're doing around metrics?
Within the SAT?
You mean comparing districts, or are they doing the same thing?
Are other metrics looking at, are other districts looking at metrics as well? And is there anything that we can learn from other districts? And that's just a thought.
I can ask around. I know from my current 3 districts, they do not do
Okay.
something like this.
Just a thought.
But again, this might not be something that we have discussion on every time we meet.
Right.
But it would be nice to say, when you leave here, to say, hey, can we add this to the agenda next time, because I'm seeing this. Can we
Right.
talk more about it? Gives us time to prepare, you time to process the data.
And I love the student.
We'll put a date on here, so it
Yeah.
says like, every month we do something like this.
Yeah, and then the last comment I would make, and kind of related back to the previous discussion around district continuous improvement, really when we have a metric, we should have a target. I mean, what are we targeting to achieve? I mean, it's good to see where we were at relative to other districts, but how do we want to perform as a district? What target on a particular metric, take average SAT score as an example. Do we, or number of kids taking AP classes, do we have a target? We want 30% of our kids taking AP classes, something like that. So think about targets as well in terms of how to push ourselves forward as a district in terms of academic performance.
And maybe that's a future conversation, once we
Yeah,
have data to say,
absolutely.
okay, hey,
Yeah,
we see this trending this way.
right,
Once we keep raising the bar, can we keep raising the bar?
exactly, yeah, and that's a deeper discussion, so, good. Okay, anything else on metrics? Good start, thank you for working on this, and we'll continue on the journey on this, and keep working on it. Anything else? Okay. Next, we move to non-homestead millage renewal election. We had talked about this data, I don't know, a couple of months ago now, I think. And then I had sent in an email, some data back out again to the board, kind of summarized data to look at. But again, I know we started the conversation a couple of months ago after the May election. Wanted to open that back up for discussion and what the board might like to understand around this, or talk about around this data. Not around the data, around the renewal election. I guess I'll start it off with, and I didn't print it off, but on the tab, on one of the graph tabs, Stephanie had provided some information relative to where other districts are at relative to millage renewal vote frequency. And we're one of 2 or 3, Doug, I think, that are every year.
I know of 2.
2, yeah. Yeah, so the rest are, there's one 10 years, I think, and there's one 3 and 5, and so they're all kind of all over the place. But there's very few that are a year. So that's just another thought, as we proceed looking at this information and how we want to proceed with this. So, thoughts, comments? Just want to open it up to the board.
I was concerned because it was the worst that we had in recorded history in terms of the support for that. And that's significant that there's no skin in the game for those who are homeowners here. It doesn't increase their taxes. So it seemed to me to be a statement from the community that there was concern about the school district.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the board should talk about that. The issue of doing it every other year, I think that's not a relevant point. It's like me going to the doctor and he says you've got precancerous conditions, so I say, well, I'm not going to come except every 10 years now. This is a good indicator. We should listen to it, and maybe we should listen more carefully if there's something going on in the community that we need to listen to. That, along with the fact that we've had a sweeping vote against the Jamestown Millage for the library. We've had virtually all of our out-of-county commissioners voted out of office, so I want to make sure that we're in touch with our community and why we're getting this negative response. And Don, you had indicated early on that there was some misinformation, so I thought maybe if you knew something about that, you could share that with us as to why the vote would have been negative.
Well, there were several comments through social media, which you can't usually rely on, as to how the funds were going to be used, and that it didn't seem that they were educated in the difference between operating expenses versus buildings. And that was one of the comments that I heard. Something to the effect that they have these beautiful buildings, and why do they need our money? Again, we have to continue to educate our population to understand that the money for bonds for building cannot be used for operating expenses, that this renewal millage is used towards our operating expenses. So that is one of the misinformations that I saw through several sources.
The other thing that parallels this is I've never in my years on the board has there been more community interest in the ongoing work of the district. We've had people attending, people have been writing, people have been talking. And I've been on this board a long time. I've been in vacant board meeting rooms, and nobody comes, nobody has concerns. There's a great level of contentment. And now we've had this uprise of concern from the citizens, and then at the same time we have this vote, which would be a serious problem not to have that vote pass. So I think we need to think what are the issues, and we need to address those issues.
And I think it's only appropriate to note that one of the big differences, Mark, since you've been on the board, is we didn't have social media, and there was not 24/7 cable news that people adhered to, whether it was factual or not. That's part of it. I think people are much more aware, and they can decide how to voice their concern. Some of it may be coming to board meetings, some of it may be in the voting booth. None of those is wrong. That could explain some of this, but when you look at the percentage of people who actually voted, I have that graph right in front of me. I want to say what was 13, 14%?
16.9%.
Right, and traditionally that's give or take a few percentage points what we're usually seeing. But to extrapolate what the community as a whole feels from 16%, I think we have to be a little bit careful on how we mesh that together with what's happening in our county and at the Jamestown Library. I don't think it's at all a surprise that some of the people decided to go to the voting booth to show their displeasure of whatever it might have been. Whether we can fix that if the information that they have is not accurate, that's another question.
Yeah, having more communications is a moot point because that would work on the positive or the negative side. The fact is, there's a higher level of division within the district, division on the board, and concerns about the direction of the district that I've ever heard in my time on the board. And I don't want us to ignore that. I think this is the barometer that we should be listening to.
So in terms of the millage elections, so looking at the other districts, I would be interested to know the time of the year that they each put the question before the voters. I think as you look at the frequency as well, asking every year in a May election generally is one of the lower turnout elections of the elections that happen throughout the year. If you want to get the greatest representation of the voters' opinion, you would ask every 4 years on a presidential election, where you typically have the highest voter turnout of any election, just by nature of there being the ballots with the most questions on them. So I would be curious if districts are taking that approach. I see there's a couple districts that are going every 4 years. I'd be curious if that's how they're doing it.
Allendale does for the presidential election.
And then I would be curious if they've seen much variation in the outcomes. I agree, Mark, that I do think that there was a message being sent with that vote. But I think it begs the question of what is the right approach going forward. Do we want the greatest voice of the entire electorate, or do we want to continue to ask annually in the May election? And I think that that's probably a greater question for the board to answer. Would it make most sense to ask the question of the voters when we know the majority of voters are going to turn out?
But we only have this to deal with right now. And could we go back to the illustration? The doctor says, I'm going to get sick. I don't say I'm going to go to the doctor fewer times. It would be a prevailing reason to ask for more information right now. But we have the next highest percentage of turnout we've ever had in this history here, and the lowest support for the with the issue. Not going to beat it to death. I just think the board is naive to ignore this.
Oh, and I'm not saying we ignore it, but I don't per se agree with the analogy of personal health and physician, because this is really, it's, what's the greatest opinion of the electorate? And what I'm saying is when you ask once a year in the lowest turnout election, you're not getting the greatest representation of the entire electorate. You're getting the subset who chooses to vote. And I think the question we have to ask is that the election we want to continue to target, or do we want to go to an election that we know a greater number of voters will turn out for?
Yeah, I'm just asking for an apples to apples comparison, which is what we have here.
Yeah,
This is apples and apples, it's not apples and peaches.
No, this isn't apples to apples. I mean, I think a message was trying to be sent to us. What do we do with that message?
Yeah, I'm not
There's
disputing
two issues.
that.
There's the message, and then there's the how often should we have this election. There's two separate issues, kind of.
So what do you think, it seems to me that both of you think you know what the answer is to that. So what do you think the message is trying to be sent for the additional 100 and some voters over, you know, because again, we're talking about not that huge of numbers of people, but definitely percentage-wise. So what is your perception of what the message was trying to be sent? And if there's a message that you're aware of that we're not addressing, tell us what it is.
Well, I'm not a prophet, nor the son of a prophet, but
Well, but you're inferring that you've got like this
I'm not-
knowledge
Well,
over
when you
here
look
as to,
at-
it appears that they're sending a message.
No, but when you look at the data,
Right.
Dawn, there's a message being sent. You can't deny it. When you look at just the numbers.
Yes.
Now, what's the message? I'm not sure. I could make some assumptions.
Well, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
I wanna
I feel like you're asking a question that you know the answer to, but you really don't want to say. And so if you're saying, no, I don't know the answer, that's fine. We can all investigate this together. But if you have some inside knowledge that can help us as a board figure out how we address that, I'd love to hear it.
you know, my stance, and this isn't just directed at you, Don, my stance in the previous discussion was that we didn't even want to look at it. When we saw the numbers, we said, well, then let's just do it every 2 years or every 4 years. We
Oh,
didn't want
no,
to
that
look
wasn't
at
the
it.
intent.
No.
Oh, no.
Well,
That wasn't the
why would we
intent.
go to that argument?
We didn't have the,
We didn't have any of this graph data
yeah,
other
we
than
didn't have
just
any,
basic.
you
I
were,
brought it to the meeting.
with all due respect, you.
I brought it to the meeting.
You brought, yeah, you brought the data, but you were reading it to us, and we didn't have any data in front of us, and so it was like, my God, let's go back and
Well, we
send us
have-
the data, and I'll summarize the data, and, but no, there wasn't intent to sweep anything under the rug.
Mark emailed us the data.
I said,
Afterwards, but it would have been nice to have it in the meeting.
Right.
we've had it, we have it now.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking
And
about.
that's what we're talking about, right?
Let's speak what it means.
Go for it.
It means that there are community people who are quite unhappy with the direction of the district.
In which
There are
way?
people who are unhappy with the board because the board stays silent on all critical issues. That we
It
have
takes
been
us a
rubber
long
stamp,
time to resolve issues.
and we take a long time to get issues resolved. We're still dealing with half of the yellow sun. Now, I know there's been some complications here, but it's a long time to resolve issues.
Well, we put a committee review in place, and that committee reviewed it. I mean, I thought through that committee process that we were, felt that that was a good process to put in place, and then allow the committee to read the book. And
There's unprecedented division on the board and in the community. Never seen this before in my lifetime here. And the community is happy with that. They want a sense of clear direction. They want a sense that the district understands, that the leadership understands this district and wants to take us in that direction.
So are you saying you've had people explain to you why they voted no? I guess if that's the case, then I sure would like to hear that. You've had people upset.
I've told you. I've just told you.
Okay, I just want to make clear what it is you were telling us.
I'm not speaking for myself.
And so how do you propose to fix it other than what we've already been working on?
Well, I think the board has to speak to issues and not rubber stamp what the administration brings to us.
And I beg to differ, Mark, that we have not rubber stamped anything in the last year and a half. Because it has not been what was traditional. And Mark, when I first joined this board, if there's anybody who rubber stamped and was in a hurry to get through a meeting, It wasn't me.
But I couldn't.
I'll just bring up an example tonight with the role of the multi-tiered systems of this MTSS, the SEL curriculum that's on here. We've talked a lot about SEL and the ruler. And I asked tonight, is the intent to go K through 12? And I know the intent is. But yet, Dr. Vanderjagt, I've asked you and you said we're looking at K through 5. We're getting different messages. Tier 1 universal says all students. All students is all students, K through 12. I see the arrows on this. We have a beautiful screen here, and we are not showing anything to the public that's here. The dashboard could be up on the screen. This could have been up on the screen. There's SEL throughout this document. I feel like
Which
there's not
was approved in the SOAR
transparency.
4 goals. I mean, I don't know if you weren't here then, Barb.
I don't think I was
Okay,
here, but
so-
we've had a lot of issues in regards to SEL and
Yes.
the ruler. So knowing that that's an issue with the community and we have a pilot going on, why would we put SEL curriculum on here without designating that it's a K through 5 pilot? Now, it leads a lot to interpretation. There's SEL throughout this. And I look at it and I feel like, oh, there's not transparency. I don't know, I'm concerned. Maybe it's just me.
No, it's not just you. I mean, it's not just me. And I think we're naive to think that it is. Leadership is a challenging thing. I say this to Doug, I say it to the board. The job of leadership is to take people who have disagreements and bring them together. That's not a hard job to do, but there's no bringing of people together here. We've had an issue about books. Why not have the board sit down with the faculty who are dealing with the books? We're going through all sorts of gymnastics here, mentally and verbally, and not bringing these people together. People who I think have the same intentions, the same desires, the same goals for this district. But instead of this happening, we have division happening and people not coming together. People have to be brought together in the same room to have conversations. I listened to some state board meeting today. I thought it was just bizarre. We listen to people come and give their concerns. We say, thank you very much, and I'm not picking on you again. We say, because I've done that too, we say, thank you very much for your comments. Well, we never give a chance for any interaction with the community. They would love to hear from us. They would love to have the board speak, to ask a question of us and not say, well, thank you for your message to us, or they want that to go on. And we have a bonfire going on. All we're doing is warming ourselves. Nobody's trying to put out the bonfire. And we need to have the bonfire put out. That's my concern about, I'm not worried about Millage here. I'm worried about the disunity in the district that's going on there, and the disunity in this board. And the sermon. And transparency, I keep hearing it, and Ken, I'll pick on you. If we don't have time to go over the old performance appraisal length, that's fine. But I felt completely schnockered by that, completely schnockered by that. I had no idea what was going on. And the more I heard the word transparency, the more I didn't believe it. And I've talked to Chad about this too.
Other comments? I hear what you're saying.
It's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. I promise you. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go away.
Understand. The barometer I always like to use is talking to building principals as well. And talking to principals and what they're hearing from parents. Again, another set of data, another barometer, and I might encourage discussion with principals about what they're really seeing and hearing with this. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying there are other points of data, there are other points of information that assess how the district, where the district's at, and how we're doing. So
I think the buildings are great. I think the district as a whole is a phenomenal district. I have a lot of confidence in this district, and the faculty, the teachers, I have a lot of confidence in that. That is where my confidence is.
Okay, any other thoughts, comments? All right, superintendent evaluation. I sent out a summary prior to the board meeting. I'll just open it up again. Questions, comments, thoughts? You just said you felt snockered. I'm sorry you felt snockered. Again, I think I've been quite clear and transparent in what happened, and this is how we unfolded. But I'm sure there'll be discussion.
That's fine. Chad, I'll turn it over to you. You were the one who said let's rip the Band-Aid off, and you mentioned performance appraisal. What did you mean by that?
Can we use a microphone, please?
Yes.
It's really,
Yeah.
really hard to hear. Thank
All
you.
right. I said, Chad, you were the one who said we should rip the Band-Aid off, and you mentioned the issue of the performance appraisal. I'd asked Chad what he meant by that.
So Mark, when we had our board discussion earlier this year, I think I pointed out that, although we were having a lot of facilitated discussion, there appeared to be three issues that were contributing to divisiveness. One being around books. I think we've had good discussion tonight around book guidelines and transparency. I think from what I see, I think we all share a lot of commonality around the desire for better transparency and control around the books that are available in the district and the parents' right to control that. Around the superintendent evaluation, just reflecting back on the board meeting where there was divisiveness around the outcome, I was just throwing that out there as being one of those elephants in the room that I wanted to point out and say it's sitting in the room and saying there ought to be conversation about that. I know it was a divided vote. You made strong comments that night, and so I pointed that out as being one of the issues that was contributing to divisiveness. I don't know if you want to go further into what you're.
Oh, yeah, happy to do that. Happy to do that.
Okay.
Happy to do that. Thanks. My concern is I didn't know what the process changed, Ken. I'm addressing you, and I said I have no idea what the process changed. You listed the number of meetings we had, and we had lengthy discussions. Doug was there. We went through, I thought, a very healthy process. Each of us had done our own evaluations. Doug had done his evaluation. We compiled our information, and we all gave and we all took. There was flexibility there. We came up with the final score, which Doug was not happy with. And then you went back and said immediately we should change the student score. And I objected. I said, why would we do that? We can't change the rules of the game after we play the game. I had no concern about what that student score was to begin with. I didn't try to have any manipulation on it. My concern was that we had a process in place, and your immediate first shot of the gun when Doug wasn't happy was to change the process and manipulate the numbers.
That's a misclarification.
Then help me out.
Yes, because I know you were not at one of the meetings, or you were gone when we had some of our discussions. And it was not that as soon as someone wasn't happy with it, Ken changed the rules. That is not how it happened.
That's the meeting I was at.
Ken's summary that he submitted to you is exactly what happened.
Yes, and that was changed. But let me go back. I was at the meeting now. You have to tell me which meeting I wasn't at, because I keep pretty good notes on that. But it was at that very first meeting when we combined our scores and came up with it, and then Doug said he was not happy with it because it was an effective and not a highly effective rating. Ken then said, let's go back and change the student score, which would have brought it to a highly effective rating.
That's a unfortunate characterization, Mark.
Help me out.
There were, we were going through the discussion, and through that discussion, there were extraordinary activities that occurred in that COVID year. And I felt and proposed that, and brought up to the board, that we discuss and we consider those extraordinary activities because superintendents, not just our superintendent, but superintendents all around us and in the state of Michigan had to deal with student academic performance issues and concerns that were over and above what the teachers had to deal with and the principals from an academic performance standpoint. And so the point I brought up to the board was, are we remiss by not thinking about the extent of the other activities that had to be done to keep our kids in school, to keep schools running, to push students academically in this extraordinary environment. So my goal was not to change the process. And again, I totally disagree with your characterization. And you can go back and you can quote emails and whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. Because I know my intent. And the intent was to say, board, let's stop and let's think about other factors that went into this past year and how that played into the performance of the district and the academic performance of our students. And those are things that only superintendents get graded on. That was my intent. And then I felt like there were some on the board that were entrenched here, just like I say here. There were some on the board that were, I don't know. There are some extenuating circumstances, and maybe we should think about that. And we had entrenched. And I don't think everybody was aligned with, okay, we went through the process and we got a score, we're going to vote on it, and that's it. My conversations with board members, where everybody was not there. So it's like, okay, well, what other ways can we approach this in order to bring closure and move forward, and then with the recognition that this year we're going to step back, take a breath, reset, have MASB come in and guide us, so that I can step out as well of that role, and then we'll make sure we're aligned on student behavior. We'll make sure we're aligned on a number of those categories that we were unclear of. Clearly, we don't have the COVID situation that we're dealing with this year, but the other change we're making is we've laid out the student achievement goals that we want our superintendent to achieve, so there'll be no ambiguity around that. So I understand what you're saying. I understand your frustration. I respectfully disagree. We can, and that's fine. We're just going to respectfully disagree. I know what my intent was. I know where I was trying to go, and I thought, and I had discussions with every single board member on how we move forward. And again, I lay it all right here, what came from those discussions. So I'm at the point where I'd like to move forward now. We've got our evaluation coming up, and I'd like to move forward with MASB guidance. And I'll take your criticism of this. I'll reflect on it. I'll say, maybe I did. I mean, what can I learn from this? I'm not going to say maybe I changed the process, because I didn't. What can I learn from this? What can I do to grow? And reflect on that and move forward. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I certainly want to move forward as well.
Yeah.
But I couldn't understand why we never met as a board to come up with a final draft here, because we worked in a number of long sessions, and we were a total of 58 days between that first draft and that final draft that came for our approval. And I couldn't understand why we could not meet as a board to discuss that, because there were conversations that took place. I don't doubt that you dealt with every individual board member. That's not a legitimate process to go to individual board members and get their input and not have the...
It is a legitimate process.
We should have our meetings together here.
That is ideal. You were gone for part of February.
And you had said,
I was
nothing you say is going to change my mind, so you do whatever.
Right, exactly.
Oh, I never said that.
Oh, you basically did. You
No.
basically did.
You better have that in writing.
You did.
No, I did not.
So, Mark, we can go back and forth on this. I understand your concerns. I understand your frustration. I understand your criticism of me, and I will take that. I accept it. Again, I'll reflect. But I don't know that I see the value in just keep going around and around and around. I know you question my integrity. You have concerns. I understand. I will reflect. I will do better. We are going to pull in MASB. I'm not going to run the process this year, and we will have an independent party. It will be Jay Bennett, who's already been here, and we'll tackle it. And I will step back and make sure there's no appearance of me attempting to influence things going forward.
Yeah, we all want to do better. I appreciate that, but I can't understand why we did not meet as a board.
You were not here, Mark.
I was. I was gone for 2 weeks.
Okay, we had gone through. I
show
said
you
it here.
I can show you my calendar. There were
Mark,
58
can
days.
Yeah, let's table this.
let's table this and end this, because there's nothing constructive that's coming of this. And if we all really want to move on, and you need to have a conversation with Ken, because obviously everybody knows how you feel, and Ken has stated his piece. As a board member, I'm asking us to move on to what else is on the agenda, because you are not going to solve your particular beef with Ken right here.
Didn't think I would. I just wanted the citizens to hear what was going on.
Exactly. Thank you for your
Okay.
politics.
That's-
Thank you for your politics, Mark.
Okay, any other comments on superintendent evaluation?
It's exactly what it is.
Okay, we'll move on to bond budget.
I've asked Pat, we met at our last, I believe, work session or board meeting. We talked a little bit about where we are when it comes to other components. When we add, things are happening with construction. Like, hey, how much, I've heard of, and I know we had breakfast and Barb said, do we have money to cover that? And so I've asked Pat to run through kind of where we are. And we'd like to give this as a monthly update on where we are with the bond budget. We have two components of our bond budget. We have what's called bond savings, and that's when we went to bid and how much money was saved in that process. And on the same line, we then have contingency. If you remember when we interviewed our construction managers on this, hold on 2 seconds. I will lose my train of thought, but you'll remind me what I was saying. We also have contingent. Remember we interviewed construction managers, the question, I believe it was Chad said 10% seems high. And normal is maybe 8%. And now we're at 10%, that's what was part of the process. So when we go through this, we have two pots of money. We have what the bond savings was, and keep in mind, on top of that, when we went to sell our bonds, we actually saved our community about $56 million because of the bond savings, of selling the bonds. Then we had bid day savings, which is about $9.5 million that can be used on projects. And a lot of that money has been allocated towards controls, because remember the conversation about control systems? We budgeted about $1 million, and if we did the whole district, it was about 5.5, and the board's like, let's do it, which made Lee very happy. But that was the process. So we also took a lot of our bid day savings and allocated towards Park and Bauer because of the increase in cost we know those are going to be. If that makes sense. So that we're starting to remove from the table, and Pat's going to go through that. And then we have this 10% that we've done things. We had some issues over at the 5-6 building with the road that we need some more soil samples. We've had to increase the I don't know, I'm not a construction person, but like the shift, the angle. Nobody's paying attention anyway, so the angle. So it costs more money to do some of that work. So we've allocated some of this money, and there are some other additionals, and we're going to come back to you near actually the next item, because this ties into the next item on the agenda. So, but we'd like to give you a monthly update, kind of where we are with the current bond. So Pat, if you could take it over for what I tried to fumble while you had organized.
Awesome, thank you. So there's a sheet coming around, and just in terms of bond terminology and things queued up there, I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of things. Can we get him a mic, please? Sorry. Thank you. So just so just in terms of a couple points on the bond budget, we have a couple categories up here, and this is a high-level view of the budget. We have 113 million, the top line there, 113,255,000, and those are projects that are in the bond budget. That's new construction, site, and remodeling. Also included in that are the fees for construction management and the reimbursable costs like supervision for our projects, things like that. So that's a high level. That's 113 million. In that, right now, we have committed $95 million. Those projects are going to be running longer than a year or two. I mean, and that's the 5-6 building, that's the high school freshman campus expansion, that's the field house. So that's total committed. That's a lot of other projects too, but that's a total committed. there's the site acquisition line there, and we don't plan to use any funds from the bond, but that was just a placeholder in the bond of $600,000. Next category there, furnishings. It's normal in a bond, you start out, you don't buy furniture until you have buildings to put furniture in. So at, I think it was 2 months ago, our meeting, we talked about furniture for the high school freshman campus expansion. That's in that committed column there, $827,000. Technology, this is a huge component of this bond, and I didn't put the commitments in because we really don't have significant commitments beyond what we spent. We go buy things like Chromebooks, new servers, things of that nature. But that's 4.2 million. You see the balance over there of roughly 6.5 million. Architectural engineering fees and costs, that committed column there is the total amount that we have signed contract with our architect engineers, plus the $400,000 that's in their contract for reimbursables. So that gives us a balance of $809,000. Bus purchase, that's another placeholder. It means our language allowed it. We have a enhanced millage to buy buses right now, so we don't really need it this time, but it was just a placeholder placed in the bond. Bond sale costs, $1.9 million. We did well. That spent line there through September or June 30, 2022, $542,000. That's essentially our Series 1. We went to sale, we sold a little more. The original plan was to split that basically $140,000 into 270, about $70 million sales. And in our first sale, the market was good, and we ended up our total proceeds were just over $96 million. So the bond budget, what's the projects that are in there? $142 million less our interest income estimated, 2.7, gets us down to that total bond budget of $139,925,000. I just want to talk about, in some places, I felt it was more appropriate to talk about the committed cost. If I showed you the amount spent right now on the construction side of the bond, that'd be a far lower number, but I really don't want to lose track of those commitments. We have signed contracts, those are approved things. So is this first run through here of a report that we can be comfortable with at the board level? I decided to go with the committed and not go with the spent for that reason. It's a more accurate reflection of what we really have left to do. Yeah. So any questions so far? What we have here, information.
Yeah, can I just ask this? And I know I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just about to, so I'm sorry.
No, you don't want to.
The original, I know what I want to for me. The original bond application, the $17.9 million in the far right-hand top corner.
Yes.
Do we know how much we have budgeted for Park and Bauer? Because those are really the last two major projects. I don't see it off the top of your head, but maybe that's something that.
So in the next slide, I can talk about that a little more. So I can go over there, but yes, we do. So to answer Dr. Vanderjack's question, this is, if you look up here in the Bauer column, this is the original amount, just about 2.9 million. That was the original bond budget for Bauer. And then we asked the board a couple months ago if we could allocate additional funds to that project to take care of cost escalation, as well as additional scope. So right now, we've allocated the extra funds out of escalation out of bid day savings to the project. So our total budget there is 5.4. Yep.
8.0.
We did the same. This is really cost escalation on park. We expanded a little bit of the scope on park, but most of that is allocation of bid day savings. So, yeah. Here's our budget.
So Pat, can you go back to the first sheet a minute?
Yes.
Not to put you on the spot, but I will. Do you have an estimate of what in aggregate has been spent? And what was the Series 1 issue? And what percentage spend are we of that Series 1?
Thank you. That's a good question. So we're spent. We're 53.5. Say $53.5 million spent. I would say we're just over 55%, 56%. We have $42 million balance, and in our big fiscal year, we had paying a lot of bills. We spent $31 million. So on a cash flow basis, we would roughly we would have cash flow well into May or June of '23, and our goal is to be size ready, and when we get the audit in and all those things, be ready to go to sale in January.
This coming January?
December would be early, but yeah, January of '23.
Okay.
I think that was your,
Yep.
you wanted to know all those.
Yeah, I'm concerned about what's happening with interest rates
Right.
now and how soon we can get out there
Right.
and issue Series 2. And depending on what happens with that issuance, how much of that offsets the savings from Series 1 where we got incredibly favorable pricing.
Yeah, we bid day was very kind to us. So yeah, we've been talking to our bond consultants and looking at there's some statutory rules on when you can only go when you have, you can tell them you're going to spend 9% of the proceeds in 3 years.
And then what is currently happening with the bond interest rates?
Recovering, but we didn't, for the first 6 months, our interest was extremely low. So we've been improving in the last 2 or 3 months, but yeah, we were low. That first 6 months, it was pretty tough. Until the Fed basically started raising rates.
So of the committed column, obviously you said those are signed contracts, all set basically. Are there things that you've also kind of sort of had on the side table saying, we really would like to look at this, we're gonna see where the numbers fall, and if so, do you have like various levels of, this would be the next thing we'd want to fulfill?
Yes. And just so I can put it, I did put in the committed column, if you look at bond sale costs, I did what I felt was a conservative estimate for a smaller sale, because our first sale was 96 million, we only have $140 million of authority. So scale-wise, I kind of doubled the cost per dollar, and that's why I have that $1.25 million in there. We have allocated in the budget, we could go up to almost $2 million, but we did, our consultants are really good, and they've found ways to lower the cost. It was a very efficient sale in the market. So, but yeah, your question is, what are the projects? And I mean, we're getting to the point where we did have a number of other projects mentioned, other facilities, other things, but there are some, I'll call them minor, but less than not major projects, like $2-3 million projects. I mean, this will pretty much run us through with, if we look at Bauer Park and ECC, we'll be close. I mean, we'll have $2 or $3 million left in the balance.
Can you go to the ECC budget?
Sure.
Do you recall the Early Childhood Center, after the field house opens and wrestling moves over to the field house, the discussion was going through and then renovating the ECC to add additional classroom space over? 855?
Yeah.
So if my calculations are close, we'll have about, with Park, Bauer, and ECC, we'll have about $3.5 million left.
Yeah.
And does that, are any of it committed, including things like the storage facility back behind this building that was mentioned a while ago that was approved? Is that included and committed or not yet?
It's not committed. The plan for the storage
Facility?
yeah, it's not committed because we don't have a contract.
So that could
for it.
come from that $3.5
Yes.
million?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then Pat, out of the 95 million committed in construction, do we know what portion of that remains in contingency?
Yes. On our two major projects, the 5-6 building and the high school freshman campus, we have $1.3 million, which is about 57% of the original balance. And the high school freshman campus, $2.3 million, which is roughly 56% of that original balance. So we're still over 50%. We're out of the ground, but there are things we know we're going to have. For instance, for the 5-6 building, we've got a good amount for that road that just bad soils that we're going to have to pay for. So we feel in talking with the construction managers and architects, we feel we've got adequate contingency there, but it's not. There's still things could come up. We're not a bad place though, for this far along in the project.
Pat,
Yes.
would this fit under technology, and could you do it for the bond if the recommendation was to do something like this Alexandria, and one of the costs was scanners and stuff? The scanner's only $30 to $50, but let's say for $100,000, you could equip the whole district. Could something like that go into the technology cost for bond?
We have, there's some restrictive language for, in the bond about being spent on students, and there's other things we can spend back basically in the closet, the things that make the system run, there's things that run on the system. So I'd have to study it, but it's potentially eligible for the bond. At least the hardware side of it. If there was software associated, sometimes we have issues with software, but the hardware side's potential. And we also have a sinking fund. If it's for students, our sinking fund language, the way it was expanded, can pay for student technology.
Yeah, the AE fee and costs are GMB and OAK?
Just GMB.
Just GMB.
Yes. The fee.
Very different, yeah.
Yeah, OAK's cost is in the construction costs.
I recall that.
Baked right into that.
And the plan is to continue to carry that 600,000 site acquisition?
We will reallocate it. It's just you have to get to a point where you're substantially complete with the other projects before the attorney can essentially apply to Treasury for us to reallocate those funds to other projects.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because of the bond qualifications. Good question.
At the furnishings line, I know we've looked at some furnishing packages. Is that reflective of only what's been bid out, or?
Yes.
It seems like the bulk of our furnishings are going into the new 5-6.
Yes.
Is that inclusive of the 5-6 box?
Well, it's in the budget, but this 827,000 is just for this, the things we did in this campus so far. Out of this freshman campus, right.
So the 5, 6 numbers.
Right, right.
Okay.
Now, obviously, because it's a whole building, it'd be a far bigger number.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So the plan is to look at this every month, Pat, or what?
It's, we could, or we could, I mean, I think we just keep improving it. But
The intent, sorry, Pat, the intent, I think, was as these numbers fluctuate to a larger extent, to keep bringing it back to the board.
Okay.
So that the question is,
That may be-
hey, we're asking if we can do this project, to respond to the question, where, do we have the money to do it?
Yeah, right.
The answer could be like, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if this $3.5 million gets down to 400,000, that's a different conversation.
Gotcha. Okay. Good. Anything else? Sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, so carrying this along, there's been a lot of conversation about where we use the bid day savings, and Bryce has worked really hard to put a summary together, and he said he spent a lot of days with me. Apologize to Bryce. But here's the bid day savings line. There's 4.3 million from the 5-6 building. Very few of us really talk about it much, but we did really, really good the first day. We went out to bid on the Baldwin Street roof, did well. Actually, OAK brought us, that was supposed to be a 2-phase project, and they brought us a recommendation that pricing was so good, let's go now. So we basically got the whole roof done. They got it done on time and way, way under budget, so we did really well on that. Freshman campus, 2.8 million, and the high school, those projects were bid together. So that total bid allocation there of 11.1 million has been used across, I mean, when you see this 136,000, this 107,000, those are things we use to cover the costs of the controls, basically. That's what most of that is. 1.1 in Riley, 1,027,000, so we covered controls, we covered, as Doug explained, we covered, and then we asked you for authority to up the scope of the bond budget for Bauer, 2.6 million, and Park.
And a little bit of forest growth.
Yeah. Yeah, that project did grow, but it was needed, good for the school.
You go all the way to the right again, Pat, so I can see what's left in the bid savings.
It was really a net.
About 500,000.
Yeah.
So 11.1 was saved, 10.6 has been allocated.
I know this looks like one simple spreadsheet, but if you look at the tabs on the bottom, Bryce has, I think he's got 100 here, tracking all this. I've vastly oversimplified his amazing work.
Other questions, comments? Good update. Good document to use to help us keep track of where things are at, and like you said, when we need to go after more money for something or reallocate, we have something to look at and go by, so. Okay. All set there, Pat?
Yes.
Don't go too far, Bryce.
Okay. Next up, we have a cross-country course.
So we have had lengthy discussions about our current cross-country course was at Baldwin Middle School, and it ran through some very low-lying areas, which would be on, it's really north of Baldwin, there's a tree line, and there's a low-lying area to the far west of that campus. We've had a lot of discussions on how to truly have a cross-country course, because the last, I think since I've been here, there's only been one cross-country meet that's been there because they've had to move it because of low-lying areas. So we've talked about other areas to move the cross-country course. I think one of the biggest components working with Coach Conkle was to have the course maybe in an area that we knew would be drier. And so we looked at the current facility at the 5-6 building and that additional property that we bought to the west of the 5-6 building that is currently being leased out and farmed. And could we create a course around that area? So that land right there that's highlighted in yellow, if you recall, Bauer Road is that line on the far right. And then we also own the land right across the road from that, a smaller portion, but additional land. The 5-6 building, you can see way at the bottom of the screen. There's a baseball field, but then to the right of that, where those, actually where the, right where the mouse is kind of moving, there is the 5-6 building. So the idea was to use that yellow line to have kind of a part of the cross-country course, to keep it away from the tree line that's a little bit farther south, and then it would continue between the fields. It would actually wrap back around by the 5-6 building. It would start and finish at the 5-6 campus. We'd have parking there for meets, potentially larger meets, whether it's regional or conference, because we have facilities from Baldwin's parking lot to baseball, softball fields for cross country. They put like tents up so the kids can get ready and stretch and go from there. But this field is clay. I don't know how else to say it. It's clay, and so it's really hard to run on. And the clay gets hard, and as you know, it's like clay in a kiln. It's when it's sunny, it doesn't break down. We could put kids running on it, and we're going to have several injuries. So I've asked Pat to kind of look at what that would look like if we tried to do something on that facility so our kids could run on it. And they won't be able to run on it this fall because they're running right now. If you haven't seen them on the streets, you haven't been on the streets. But how could they run on this facility? And it's going to take a little bit of work. So going back to the budget conversation, when we started having some preliminary conversations I had with Ken and Barb, was about that's where how much money is, where does the money come from? So if Pat can go through kind of what that might look like in the cross-country course, to get some direction from the board, because it is going to take time to do this. This isn't an overnight. We're not going to throw sod on it and say, okay, kids go run. It's going to take time. So, Pat, you could.
Sure. Thanks, Doug. And so, as Doug said, and I'm having a lot of fun learning about blue clay. It has amazing qualities. It's the only substance I think you can pull it out of the ground and you don't even need to fight. You could almost make bricks out of it without firing it. It's an amazing substance. So from the start, and the school has a number of properties, and the farmers have warned me of this, the current farmer has warned me of this, is that whatever you do not till this, or try to rototill this, or disc it, or plow it, or do anything, or you're gonna have a mess on your hands. So, what our goal is to get this course seeded and get some turf going, and then there are a couple ways to address this. We can, because it's a hayfield now, take a long time, which we don't feel is the best for the kids. But that was the plan we were on. That was what we were on, was to split seed it, and this over time, top dress it with sand, fertilize, and build up a nice course, much like if you have a lawn. But your lawn isn't, as Doug mentioned, go through low areas that have drainage issues. And unlike a lot of our lawns, if we throw dirt alone on top of blue clay, it's going to have issues with the roots, it's going to have issues with drainage, it's going to cause us more problems than we're worth. So luckily for us, G&E has an expert. Tim Garretts has worked for the district, in the district. He's works for G&B. He's a landscape architect, engineer, and he's really good. So Tim, been talking to Tim, Bryce has been talking to people. We've been talking to our church people in the district. Rob Shepard is an expert on blue clay. He's helped me, he's educated me so much. But we've got a number of things we want to do. This project, just for the black dirt alone, to fill in the lower spots and to get some turf going, is $130,000. Way beyond a small project. So, our recommendation is to study this with Tim's help at GMB, get a, on top of the, just the sandy soil put on it. And you gotta fertilize it, you gotta come back with other sand, aerate it, and that's not even considering the drainage issues. But our recommendation is to bring this back, get some better estimates of total cost, and go at this like not a major project, but a project that's probably gonna be close to a couple $100,000 to get this practicable. And that's a short term. This course is, he's got it listed on here as 0.84 miles. The long-term vision for this is really for this to be a competition course. And if you can see at all where my mouse is right here, this Coach Conkel said to us, we need to have a wide start line here to get athletes going down and funnel out here to this course, out here into the course. So that's a years down the road when we get these play fields developed here. But what we would like to do is get this area seeded, get some grass growing this fall, much like I grew up on a little farm in Saginaw Valley, much like winter wheat. Get a plantation of bluegrass growing this year, and then next year come at this with more sand, more dirt, and more contractors to get some real good drainage and turf developed for the kids, and then they might be able to run on it as early as next fall. Something they could be on. Coach Conkel said kids are pretty tough, pretty flexible. They can be on it sooner. I mean, they're not beating down that grass. We've been mowing this since June, our own maintenance staff, and it really has changed the composition of it. There still are places where you could twist an ankle, but that's our ask that we have. I'm just, without having a lot of numbers here, I've got the dirt number alone. It's going to be at least a $200,000 project, but our kids do deserve it. It's the one sport. We've disrupted they had a course. It wasn't a great course, but we've really disrupted their course with our construction of the 5-6 building and the roads. So cross country, and Chad, you asked earlier about numbers for students in programs. Cross country has awesome participation numbers. It's not a cut sport, and it's a great lifestyle, great thing for kids long term. Like I say, life skill for kids. So we really believe it's best for kids to get this course going, and we have the property now. We're working in partnership with a farmer. He's still going to farm the inside, which is a hayfield now, and the two of us can cohabitate quite well together. So,
questions?
I know Coach Conkel well enough to know that he's given this a lot of thought, and I would assume that means also that there was no place else in the district that there would even be some feasibility of reconsidering because of the cost?
I mean, we haven't looked, we've got our Riley Street campus. It's like track, other varsity sports. It's a natural to have it up there for the time. But we master planned the Riley Street campus. That doesn't mean we need to do a lot of work out there too. I mean, it's extensively, because we have a lot of land. We have the Vannery property now between lower and upper. And we have that other property that's just to the west of Jamestown lower. So we do have we have big areas out there to master plan. This really seems ideal for it though. But
it's a great question. I'm trying to think of other areas that we have. Obviously, this site does not have a place to put a cross-country course. The one nice thing about that course is if we do future building in that area, the course can remain. because we did it around the perimeter, so we can go into there and still put a facility or two in there and still get out to Bauer Road. It also can connect to the rest of the course that does exist in the bottom left-hand corner, which would be on the kind of the southeast side of that turn. It actually then goes out and can come around between those fields, and that course does exist already, and that will help them complete their loop from to get it to a 5K course.
Does that connect them like with the sidewalk on Baldwin, do you know?
No.
Okay.
It does not.
That-
That's a middle
they-
school track experience when the kids use the sidewalk by Baldwin.
Okay.
No, it does go back to Baldwin a little bit, then it comes back around, it goes between the fields, it comes all the way up to 32nd. It actually will cut over the service road for buses and then come back around. 36, sorry, yep, and then come back around, so.
I'm just thinking for it to be utilized by the public as well as cross-country, but I would think it would be pretty easy to connect up with that if someone wanted to
Yeah.
run that.
Yeah.
Just an observation, if you do build that as a cross-country course, that line that runs right through the middle there is going to be filled with spectators running back and forth. And we ought to plan for what that looks like as well, if there's a way to, whether you want them to or not, they're going to go up and down across that farmer's field.
So that's a good question. The other question is this. This is a training course. When they do complete this and they start down here, I think they actually start down in here. You need 600 feet wide for 100 meters before it narrows down. They can go this way, and I think they go around, I think then they leave and come through here. So really, it might be this distance too, that they're going from here over to here.
Yeah.
So that either this line or here to here, we'd have to figure it out, because you're right.
Other questions, comments?
So we'd like to bring this back to the board at the next board meeting, so this is just a discussion on this, and then if we get favorable, I guess, feedback today, then is that okay? I'm not really here to
I'm not hearing any
objection to bringing it back.
objections to it, yeah, sounds fine, move forward. Okay, thanks, Pat. Okay, we move on to merit pay.
All right, this is not anything that you haven't seen before. It's the same from 2019-20, but according to school code, we have to have a merit system within our policies and procedures and all that kind of stuff. So I just made some revisions for this year, and then I also am proposing a change of amount for teachers. We have not changed it. This is our 4th year, and we haven't changed that amount. We also, due to COVID and learning loss and expanding our MTSS practices and adding MTS specialists and PBIS specialists to every building, there's just a lot that we ask of our teachers. And everything within merit is all outside the school day. Anything that is Schedule B is not a qualifier for merit. These are all just reminders. This is nothing different than we've ever done. And there are caveats of what would disqualify a staff member from getting merit. So the proposal, the difference and what I would like to bring the board for final decision on September 8th would be just the amount, and I'm proposing to double each tier. So tier 1 would go to 250, tier 2 would go to 500, and tier 3 would go to 750.
So
And we
this
can always
reflects
change that
the
going in.
higher rates already.
Yeah. This is a draft, and I apologize. I did not put the watermark. I should have put the watermark draft on it, so I do apologize. But this does reflect the newest language, and so I wanted you to have that, and then I'll bring it September 8th.
And can you, when you bring it, can you speak to, in previous years, the percentage of eligible merit pay that was ultimately paid out, if it's 100% or 95 or 90, something?
Yes, I can do that. I can tell you total amounts that have been paid out every year for sure, but I can also break it down to tiers and things like that as well.
Good. Any questions or comments on that?
Would there be any consideration of having tier 3 1,000, 750, and 500? Since it's been a while since it's been improved, would there be money for that?
So we doubled it from last year.
Because even 250 is not that much. mean,
Well,
there's a lot
and
of
I have to
hours
be
out
honest with you, we encourage our staff to get to tier 3, and I think most of them aspire to do that also. Aspire, I'm looking at our staff back there. As you're thinking, sure.
Some of our hours for 750, I would love to see 7,000. Choose to add than to take away from year to year. That's the only problem when you're dealing with budgets, right?
I will say that, and I've said this before, if everybody does everything that they're supposed to do outside of the traditional school day, contractually they would qualify for tier 1. So truly a large majority, and I will get the numbers, so I'm not just like speaking off the cuff, do qualify for tier 2 and tier 3. But you know, this is where we kind of felt comfortable with our current budgetary and what we've spent in the past. But you know, I can look at that and break those numbers down too.
Does the board want to see that, a higher amount? Provided suggestion? Or we,
I would love to see what the difference would be.
okay,
They work hard.
They do.
let's,
I agree.
let's take a look at that, okay? Other questions or comments? All right, that's all our agenda items. We move on next to, right, you got everything? Okay. Recognition of visitors and hearing of people present. We have 2 individuals that would like to speak with the board this evening. First up, we have Greg Chansky. We'll get our camera going up here and
I'm going to start without the timer. Good evening. My name is Greg Chansky, and I'm running for the board this fall. I have a couple of things I want to comment on. One is the candidate forum. I think it's more important this year than ever before. The issues being discussed in which voters will make their decisions are more distinct than ever before. We should be providing the public with every possible opportunity to hear what the candidates have to say concerning the issues. Second, I received a Meet the Candidates survey from Stephanie about 3 weeks ago, and I answered the questions. I work to provide as much information as possible to the voters. I have heard that the administration or someone is considering editing the responses for length. I would ask that that not be done, but rather publish each of the candidates' responses in full. There's no reason to limit information to the voters. A couple other issues I want to talk about. Millage and funding remarks, and I wrote this prior to the meeting. As I speak with voters in the community, their dissatisfaction with the district is and will lead to reduced revenue from at least 2 sources. First, parents are moving their kids from the public schools and when affordable going to private schools, and also homeschooling. Each of these lost students will cost Hudsonville $9,150 in 2022 and 2023. Second, parents and other voters may rethink their normally positive attitude in support of millage and bond issues. Right now, the public school system is awash in more money than we have ever seen and that we will ever see again. We need to be prudent and make wise decisions on issues which can affect future funding. We need to listen to the voters who fund this district. Jamestown Library should be the canary in the coal mine for HPS. Their fire millage passed 61%, their road millage passed 53%, their library failed at 37%. That's the first millage in Georgetown Township and Jamestown Township that has failed since 2011. Finally, the book review process needs to be changed to put the emphasis on looking at books prior to being added to the district library and classrooms, and not having to react to questionable choices once they are already in the system. And I hear all this stuff about the legal stuff. They shouldn't be in there to begin with. And I think the question was asked, was the wish list vetted before it was put in? And I think the answer was, I don't know if we don't know, or just the administrators at the schools did it. It's too important of a situation for us not to know exactly how that happens, and also who's responsible for that. We should know the answer to those questions in everything that we do. So, and I yield back my last 10 seconds.
thank you for your comments. And Aaron Doobie.
Greetings, board. I'll try to make this quick. First, a huge heartfelt thank you from myself and numerous community members that I know that have reached out to me, specifically to you, Dr. Vanderjagt, as well as all of the admin and staff working at Baldwin. They overwhelmingly said you all did an amazing job with a horrible situation, and all of their kids felt loved and safe through all of that. So thank you, and thank all of you. Pass that along. There have been numerous people that asked me that. I want to also reiterate something I brought to you before. Gender identity, orientation, gender expression are not sexually explicit things any more than your nameplates are. If I can sit here and see Mrs. Dawn Sneeden, and we're going to try to say that trying to explain that gender identity is going to be sexually explicit, we got to get rid of name tags. We got to dress everyone in the same uniforms. That's a crazy idea. Don't believe the lies that buy into that. Last point I want to make is I am a data guy. I love databases. I spend all day working on database queries. I know how amazing that stuff is, and I hear, let's get everybody in Alexandria, and I'm like, yes, that's awesome. But remember return on investment. Are we really wanting to drop millions of dollars for a process that has affected, it sounded like there was 3 families, 2 books, 3 families. Let's make sure we are being responsible with the treasure that is entrusted to us and you, and look at where can we best serve kids with the most impact for those dollars. Because as much as I love databases, I love our dollars helping kids more, and I do not think that that is a good, sound fiscal investment. Obviously, something needs to happen, but I don't think that is a good solution. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, we'll do around the table and then call it a night. Anything else you want to cover, Ms. Armstrong?
No.
Okay. Andy? Pat?
Well, I want to just thank all the staff, thank Doug's leadership. I just noticed with the tragedy today, it made a difference for the things that I worked in a district before Dr. Vanderjagt came with the safety teams and the MERT teams, and it's just, I know his leadership has fostered a lot of great systems. Mainly leads the process for the quick response. And I was just so impressed at how, as all this was going on, the teams were just extremely responsive to the issue, and staff felt supported both at Baldwin and in the bus garage. And just want to thank Dr. Vanderjagt's leadership for bringing that to Hudsonville schools.
Yeah, again, I wonder if we could get a discussion item on the agenda for the 8th of September to discuss scheduling the board hosting board forums. We have 8 candidates running for 3 positions, and it'd be good if we had good exposure. So we put on the agenda to discuss it at the September 8th meeting. And then Barb had emailed the board, I think, a very fine PowerPoint presentation, which I'd like to have presented to the board at our next work session on the 26th of September. And I also have one that I'd like to present at the same time. Mine wouldn't take any longer than hers. You've seen hers, so she'll know about how long it is. So we have those 2-hour presentations from the board. Okay?
Okay, so we got to discuss board forums
On the 8th.
on the 8th and
26th,
2
we have
PowerPoints
2 PowerPoint
on the
presentations.
26th. Okay, Chad?
Just thoughts and prayers for the Tibbe family, for all the transportation staff, all the staff and students affected by that. I know it's going to be hard in the coming days, and just hope that the community can help keep that family and everybody affected in their thoughts and prayers. I know that it's a tragic loss, and just appreciate all the staff who rallied around to support everybody affected. And I know it's just going to be some tough days ahead, and just want to hold everybody close.
Yeah, I echo what Chad said. I actually had people from work texting me because it was on the TV tonight. So just really keep that family in your prayers. Thank you for all the teachers, first day of school. That sounds like it went great. Saw the buses this morning. And just, if we can, just again, if we can post things for all the people that are here, sometimes it's easier if they can have a visual when we talk about things. We have the technology, so let's use it.
Okay, can I have a motion and a second to adjourn, please? Motion by Chad.
I'll support that.
Mark, all in favor, yes?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.